Committee can only receive motions for the election of the chair. The clerk cannot receive other types of motions, cannot entertain points of order, nor participate in debate. We can now proceed to the election of the chair. Pursuant to Standing Order 106-2, the chair must be a member of the government party. I'm now ready to receive motions for the chair.
Mr. Clerk, I would really love to entertain a debate with you, but I understand that that's not possible given what you just said. So therefore, I would move Ms. Sahota as the chair of PROC.
It has been moved by Mr. Gerritsen that Ruby Sahota be elected as chair of the committee. Are there any further motions? No further motions. I declare the motion carried. Ruby Sahota is duly elected chair of the committee. I invite Ruby Sahota to take the virtual chair.
Thank you, Mr. Babe. Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be back on this committee, and it's nice to see all of the very familiar faces and some new members as well. Welcome to PROC. It's nice to have you, Ms. Vecchio, Tom. It's nice to see you as well. And I think I'm trying to see Mr. Doherty. You've subbed in before as well, so it's nice to have you back. And it seems like many of the other members or our permanent members from the last Parliament. Oh no, Mr. Finnegan. Of course, Mr. Finnegan is a new member as well, and you've been subbing in before. Welcome. Nice to have you back. And of course, Ms. Blaney, Mr. Turnbull, Mr. Algabra, Mr. Gerritsen, Dr. Duncan. Pleasure to have all of you. And Monsieur Therien, nice to have you back as well. And Mr. Tucker. So I don't think I've forgotten anybody at this point, but I think we should carry on with the election of the vice chairs at this time. And then after that, we'll get into routine motions.
Okay. Pursuant to Standing Order 106-2, the first vice chair must be a member of the official opposition. I'm now prepared to receive motions for the first vice chair.
I think I have my hand raised.
Ms. Vecchio?
Yes.
Hi. I would like to put forward the name of Todd Doherty for a vice chair representing the CPC.
It has been moved by Ms. Vecchio that Todd Doherty be elected as first vice chair of the committee. Are there any further motions?
Congratulations, Todd.
Okay, I'll just put the question, 1 second. The motion proposed by Ms. Vecchio is the committee, one moment, please. It has been moved by Ms. Vecchio that Mr. Todd Doherty be elected the vice chair of the committee. All in agreement? Okay, welcome, Mr. Doherty.
Congratulations.
Thanks, guys. It's an honor.
Conformément à l'article 106.
Pursuant to Standing Order 106-2, the second vice chair must be a member of an opposition party other than the official opposition. I am now prepared to receive motions for the second vice chair.
I'll move Monsieur Therien as the second vice chair.
Il est proposé par Monsieur Gerritsen.
It is moved by Mr. Gerritsen that Mr. Alain Therien be elected as second vice chair of the committee. Are there any further motions? Mr. Gerritsen's motion that Mr. Therien be elected as second vice chair of the committee has been adopted. Welcome, Mr. Therien.
The vice chairs of the committee. back over to you.
Congratulations, Monsieur Terrien. Nice to have you aboard again. Okay, well, let us get into the routine motions. I think before we start into any other discussion, it's a priority that we set those in place. Mr. Turnbull.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd like to move to adopt the routine motions, and I'll read them one by one, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So I move, the analyst services that the committee retain as needed and at the discretion of the chair, the services of one or more analysts from the Library of Parliament to assist it in its work.
Okay. Mr. Clerk, should we vote one-on-one or just see if there's any opposition to any of the routine motions?
The committee could proceed in whichever way it so pleases. It can choose to go through all of them and adopt them in a block. They can also choose to go through them one at a time with a vote after each one.
Okay, so how would the committee like to proceed? Would you like to proceed in blocks or one at a time?
Madam Chair, can I suggest that we see if there are any of the routine motions that anybody would like to separate out, and then first we vote on everything else in one block, and then if there are separations, we could deal with those on their own.
Okay, are there, I guess what's being asked is there any objection to any of the routine motions?
Well, I have a few questions, Madam Chair. So
Perfect.
however you want to move through it, I'm fine to do that. I just have a couple of logistical questions and one proposition, which members already know about, but I thought it was important to have discussion about. So I'll leave it in your hands what to do next. I did raise my hand, so I'm not sure what the process is.
Yes, please go ahead, Ms. Blaney.
So the ones that I, hopefully I'm doing this right, and I will unraise my hand as soon as I'm done. First of all, I just wanted to put forward a discussion about the second and subsequent rounds. Right now we have the Conservative Party for 5 minutes, the Liberal Party for 5 minutes, the Conservative Party a second time for 5 minutes, the Liberal Party for a second 5 minutes, and then the Bloc and the NDP for 2.5. I just wanted to recommend that the NDP and the Bloc be able to be moved between the two rounds, between the Conservatives and Liberals. So it would read Conservative Party 5 minutes, Liberal Party 5 minutes, Bloc 2.5, NDP 2.5, and then return to the Conservative and Liberal parties for 5 minutes. So that is one proposition that I would like to propose. I just feel that often we don't get any chance to have that second round, and I think that's a little bit of unfairness that I would like to address. And then the other questions that I have are just simple ones, which is the right underneath the second rounds that talks about the clerk being authorized to distribute documents to the members only when documents are in the both official languages. And of course, I think that is absolutely correct. I'm just wondering in the hybrid model, how that will be done and just the method around that. And then of course, the last question that I have is just around the clerk's responsibility to make sure that there's necessary arrangements to provide working meals for the committee and subcommittees. I'm just wondering if it's a hybrid model, how soon are the committee members required to let the clerk know so that the clerk can do that process? I just want to make sure that we're very respectful to their time if we're there in person. Of course, there would be a meal provided. I don't expect that to happen if I'm participating virtually, but I want to make sure that we respect the clerk's time in these unprecedented circumstances. Thank you.
Okay, we have, I think, a couple of other issues, Mr. Doherty, and then Monsieur Terrien.
Madam Chair and to colleagues, I just want to know, in other committees that we've been on, it's in the chair's prerogative in terms of questioning witnesses and the length of time that they have been given for statements that then, if we feel that 6 minutes or 8 minutes is enough rather than 10 minutes, are we still going with the same assumption that it'll be the chairs and the committee's prerogative as per the study that we're doing, that the length of time allotted to witnesses can be adjusted as we see fit that then will give additional time for speaking and questions from the committee.
Madam Chair, can I make a point of order? Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, Mr. Garrettson.
Just in terms of making sure that we're running through this properly, maybe you want to consult with the clerk, but Mr. Turnbull had moved a motion, and I think we're kind of still back on that analyst services motion that he had moved. I thought we were just discussing how to go through this at first, but now it seems like we're starting to hone in on some of the issues. So should we deal with that analyst services motion that's on the floor before we continue debating other items in this?
Yeah, and I think I'm not sure if Mr. Therrien has debate on the issue or just a suggestion as to which part. It seems like so far everyone seems to be in favor of all of the routine motions other than the questioning section, which there's some debate or maybe motions to be put forward in that section. And then the working meals, I think there was just some clarification. But other than that, so far, nothing has been raised. And I just want to see if Monsieur Therrien has any other issues with any of the sections. Otherwise, perhaps we could just then pass all non-contentious sections altogether and then come back to those two. Monsieur Therrien.
Well, I just wanted to continue on with what Ms. Blaney's comments when it comes to the second round of questions. Is it time to talk about that now, or are we going to come back to that a little later in a more official way? I had comments about what she said.
We are going to come back to that because that seems to be a section that we won't pass until there's been some discussion or some motions on it. So we'll come back to that one. And the working meals, the clerk will be authorized to make the necessary arrangements to provide working meals. So you just wanted a time frame to be put in place, Ms. Blaney?
I just wanted clarity. I know that we are to let the clerk know if we'll be participating in person. I'm just wondering if there's a clear timeline around that, just to be respectful.
Madam Chair and Ms. Blaney, for the working meals, generally for the hybrid meetings, I would be proceeding the way I would when the entire committee is meeting in person in a committee room. I would be ordering meals for the members of the committee. It might take a little while to kind of figure out how many are actually participating in person versus virtual. Any heads up that I get, obviously that one of you will be participating in person would be of benefit. However, I will be sort of ordering, I guess, a certain amount of food to permit everybody who is here in person to have a meal. I must say, and I'll take the opportunity while I have the floor, that obviously because of the special COVID arrangements, the nature of the catered meals that we usually get will be different. No longer will there be shared platters of food that people can pick off of and assemble a plate. They'll be individualized, enough individualized plates for any of the members who do show up in person.
Yes, Ms. Blaney.
So my thoughts on this is that the amazing clerks and all the analysts and staff that do so well by us every day are going to always respond to us accordingly, and I respect that. I'm just wondering if it's something we should discuss, that it actually be in the routine motions that you have to tell, because again, it is also a little bit of a waste of money if we have the clerk getting food for everybody and 3 people are showing up. So I'm just wondering, as the mother committee, if we should seriously consider this new format and give direction so that there's less of a lack of clarity for the amazing people who work for the committee.
Okay, so perhaps let's, Ms. Vecchio, do you have something on a different section, or is it debate on a particular section?
It will be after routine proceedings. It's all happy. It's all good.
Okay. So, Mr. Clerk, are we able to perhaps pass or call to move all motions except with the exception of the questioning motion and the meals, and then we can discuss that afterwards?
Yes, Madam Chair, you could proceed that way if you want to group them all together into one block, except for the 2 that you would like to have, the committee would like to have further discussion on.
Okay, is it okay with the committee if we proceed that way? That way we've dealt with the majority of issues? Okay. Mr. Clerk, would you mind calling the question?
Mr. Turnbull might want to amend his motion.
Yes, that is correct.
Do I, Madam Chair, if I can just ask for clarification here. So the two sections are the one on opening remarks and questioning of witnesses. And then the other one is it the travel accommodation and living expenses, or am I getting that wrong?
No, it's the working meals.
Oh, right. Sorry, I missed that. Yep. And shall I read all of them into the record? Is that necessary, Mr. Clerk? Justin?
Yes, Mr. Turnbull, you could proceed that way so that everybody has maximum clarity, if that would be a benefit for the other members.
Unless you want to save time, I don't need to read them.
It's a lot of reading, I think. Would any of the members request that Mr. Turnbull read into the record all of the sections being moved?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Mr. Turnbull.
If you need a break, Ryan, I'm happy to help out.
No, I think I can read a couple of paragraphs. Thanks. Okay, so I move that subcommittee on private members' business, that pursuant to Standing Order 91-1, Section 1, the subcommittee on private members' business be composed of one member from each recognized party and a chair from the government party, and that Jeanette Pettipas-Taylor be appointed chair of the subcommittee.
Okay, well, it was a good thing you were reading that out, because I believe you'll have to substitute that name.
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't have to substitute anything. Okay, thank you.
That's okay. And I'll continue on then. And I move that subcommittee on agenda and procedure, that the subcommittee on agenda and procedure be established and be composed of 5 members, the chair, 1 member from each party, and that the subcommittee work in the spirit of collaboration. I also move that meeting without a quorum, that the chair be authorized to hold meetings to receive evidence and to have that evidence printed when a quorum is not present, provided that at least 4 members are present, including 1 member of the opposition and 1 member of the government. But when traveling outside the parliamentary precinct, that the meeting begin after 15 minutes, regardless of members present. I also move that document.
Ms. Blaney, do you have an issue with that motion?
I do. Sorry.
The concern that I had is that in the last one we had in this parliament, we actually had 4 members, 2 members of the opposition and 2 members of the government, not 1 member of the government and 1 member of the opposition. So I just want to make sure the original ones were just 1, but then we modified them and all committees followed suit. So I just wanted to point that out.
And Madam Chair, I was of the same, is that it is 2 members of the opposition, 2 members of government.
At least, okay.
I'm okay with changing that.
You'd like that to be amended then? Okay.
It looks like they do, and I personally don't have a problem.
Does anyone oppose that being amended? Okay.
So, Madam,
Ryan, could you?
Madam Chair, I can read it out so that just for clarity, it would be that the chair be authorized to hold meetings to receive evidence and to have that evidence printed when a quorum is not present, provided that at least 4 members are present, including 2 members of the opposition and 2 members of the government. But when traveling outside the parliamentary precinct, that the meeting begin after 15 minutes, regardless of members present.
Okay. Mr. Turnbull?
I consider that to be friendly.
Okay,
so
moving on.
Move on? Yep.
Yeah, moving on to document distribution.
Yep. That the clerk of the committee be authorized to distribute documents to members of the committee only when the documents are available in both official languages, and that witnesses be advised accordingly. And I move that travel, accommodation, and living expenses of witnesses, that if requested, reasonable travel, accommodation, and living expenses be reimbursed to witnesses not exceeding 2 representatives per organization, provided that in exceptional circumstances, payment for more representatives be made at the discretion of the chair. Access to in-camera meetings, that unless otherwise ordered, each committee member be allowed to have 1 staff member at an in-camera meeting, and that 1 additional person from each House officer's office be allowed to be present. Transcripts of in-camera meetings, that 1 copy of the transcript of each in-camera meeting be kept in the committee clerk's office for consultation by members of the committee or by their staff. Notice of motion, that a 48 hours notice interpreted as 2 nights shall be required for any substantive motion to be considered by the committee, unless the substantive motion relates directly to business then under consideration, provided that the notice be filed with the clerk of the committee no later than 4 p.m. from Monday to Friday, that the motion be distributed to members in both official languages by the clerk on the same day the said notice was transmitted, if it was received no later than the deadline hour, and that 3 notices received after the deadline hour or on non-business days be deemed to have been received during the next business day, and that when the committee is traveling on official business, no substantive motions may be moved.
Okay, all in favor of the motions moved by Mr. Turnbull? Okay, motion's carried. Okay, now we'll move back to the 2 sections, and let's move back to the first one, the time for opening remarks and questioning of witnesses. And I believe on the speakers list we have Monsieur Terrien and then Ms. Vecchio.
Mr. Terrien? Yes. On the motion on the second round, concerning what Ms. Blaney had mentioned, is that what we're talking about? Oui, c'est exact. I understood what she wanted. So simply that the Bloc and the NDP don't lose a turn in the round, because often we don't reach the end. And I agree that we insert the NDP and the Bloc inside the second round so that we can be sure to have a turn. I think this was done at the Health Committee, the possibility to guarantee that we reach the end of the second round. So would it be adequate to guarantee that the second round is organized so that the NDP and the Bloc are sure to be able to speak? Would that be one way to make sure that we can speak in the second round? Because I know that it's done in another committee. So it's a question, but on the principle, I agree with Ms. Blaney.
I guess that's a question for me.
C'est une question pour moi, je suppose. J'adorerais garantir que le Bloc et le NPD aient l'occasion de...
Yes.
Yeah, the translation on the English channel is in French.
Oh. Okay, there's a translation issue.
Madam Chair, we'll look into it and see what the issue is. If you can just suspend for maybe a couple minutes, and we'll try to figure out what the problem is.
Okay.
I think it's fine now. I don't hear the translators anymore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it has stopped.
Okay. Proceed.
Yeah, I would love to guarantee that the Bloc and the NDP get their time in the second round each and every time we have witnesses. But the issue, and we've seen it happen, I think for the most part, when we had extended longer meetings, I was able to do that. And I obviously want to be able to do that always. But when we have the regular 3-hour time slot for a committee meeting, it's a little bit more challenging. to be able to always guarantee it unless we extend the time of our meeting that day, because technical difficulties can arise, things can happen. So I understand why, Ms. Blaney has raised this issue. And I'd
À ce
love to find
moment-là,
out.
je pourrais vous dire qu'on est d'accord avec Mme Blaney pour qu'on puisse changer.
Then I can say that we agree with Ms. Blaney to change, if possible, the way the second round is organized so that the Bloc and the NDP have more chances of being able to speak a second time for each witness.
No, I'm okay. Just pass it on to Tom Lukowski. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Lukowski.
We should probably practice pronouncing my last name.
Yes,
it's a tough one.
Let's pronounce it.
It's Lukiski.
Lukiski. Okay. Is that good?
Very good. Thank you. Quickly, colleagues, just as way of background, I'm back on PROC. I had previously been on PROC for 9 years when I was parliamentary secretary to the government House leader when the Conservatives were in power. But for the past 5 years, I've been the chairman of government operations and estimates. And I put that in context by saying that during my tenure as chair, we had the same questions come up on a fairly frequent basis, that on many occasions, both the Bloc and the NDP were prevented from asking questions simply because we ran out of time. What I did, and it was a unilateral and very arbitrary decision that I made, was I would on many occasions reduce the amount of time in the first and second round that would allow the Bloc and the NDP to ask questions. As an example, if we had 1 hour of witnesses and the two witnesses presenting were giving 10-minute opening addresses, that would left 40 minutes for Q's and A's. And so I would arbitrarily reduce the first round to 5-minute questions, the second round to 4-minute, and that would leave 2 minutes each for the Bloc and the NDP at the end. And that worked out very well, but I must say it was not guaranteed. It was just the approach that I took to try and ensure fairness so that my Bloc and NDP colleagues would have ample opportunity to ask questions. In addition, from time to time, what I did in order to allow more time for questions, if we had a government representative, whether it be a minister or a public service officer who was giving opening comments, I would ask concurrence from the committee members that we would not have those opening statements given verbally, but those opening statements would be delivered, and I would ask the committee to allow them to be appended to the minutes of the meeting as if read. And that way it allowed even more time for questions. So I guess my point is, Madam Chair, is that at the discretion of the chair, there are many options available if in fact your overriding desire is to allow both the Bloc and the NDP to have questions. And I fully support that because that's how I operated when I was the chair. But to Mr. Tarian and Madame Blaney, I'm not sure if there's any way, unless we have unanimous consent, to guarantee those speaking slots. But if a bit of a leap of faith is required, so that if in this committee and other committees, if both Bloc and NDP members trust the discretion of the chair to do everything in his or her power to ensure that the third and fourth parties in the House have an opportunity to ask questions, that may be the best we can get to. But I would certainly support you, Madam Chair, if in fact you use your discretionary powers to try and do just that, to ensure the NDP and the Bloc are not overlooked and are not prevented from asking questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lukiski. I really appreciate the experience you bring on this committee, and I know I got to sit across from you in some committees of PROC, some meetings where you subbed in 2 parliaments ago, and thank you for that suggestion. I think it is great, and of course, I do wish to allow a proper chance for questioning for all parties. And I like your idea of being able to shorten. We have had to do that in the past where on some rounds I asked for consent from the members, whether they would be okay with me either shortening the opening remarks or shortening some of the other parties' time that was allocated so that there would be enough time at the end to allow for questions from the bloc and from the NDP. There's a couple more suggestions, and then maybe we can get to a solution on this issue. Mr. Garretson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I really like what I just heard. To be completely honest, you know, if you look at the total number of minutes that are in here for questions, it's 49 minutes, a 10-minute introduction, that statement that is exactly just under an hour, 59 minutes. I would, you know, definitely support shortening the opening statements. My own personal opinion is that if you can't get your point across in 6 minutes, I don't know how much more you're going to be able to get across in an additional 4 minutes. I'm, to be honest, skeptical of moving the time slots around. I'm not 100% certain that that's the best way to go about doing it. I really do think that if we can limit the amount of time and even reduce the amount of time, let's say to 6 for the opening statements to 6 minutes, I think that that would be a much better way to go about doing this. So I'm interested in hearing what others have to say on this, but as it stands right now, I really like the idea of shortening the opening statements by the witnesses.
And then what would you do with that extra time? Would you be tacking it on somewhere, or would you just think it would guarantee us getting to the end?
In an attempt to guarantee getting to the end, that's why I would do it that way. Because I mean, right now it's at 59 minutes, so you literally have no opportunity to be off a little bit. The other thing that I would suggest, Madam Chair, is that as the chair, I would really encourage you, and I know you were really good about it in the last committee, but you know, I'll pay credit where credit is due. I liked Marilyn Gladu as chair when I subbed in once on she was chair a number of years ago on the status of women, and she was really good because as soon as it got to the 10-minute mark, she said, "Okay, you're done, thank you," and then she go to the next person. And I think that, you know, you might think that you're being rude, but the truth is that if you treat every single witness the exact same way, then you can rely on the fact that you can say, "Sorry, I treat everybody like this. It's not unique. I'm not doing it for a conservative or a liberal witness or something like that." And I think that if we can, you know, get to a place where that
I'm rude
happens,
to everyone.
No, never. But then I think, yeah. But then I think that, you know, it can be done. But you're so diplomatic in the way that you do it. I'm sure you'll come across being the nice guy doing it. I'll leave it at that.
I don't know about that, but yeah, I could try that. Yeah, we could reduce the time there. Would people be in favor of? There's 2 scenarios that Ms. Blaney has presented. It seems like I don't know if anyone has jumped in support of any of those scenarios yet, but nor has anyone jumped in support of reducing the time given to the witnesses. So, Mr. Turnbull.
I was just going to show support for the suggestion made by Mr. Garretson. I thought that was a really good suggestion, potentially of shortening the opening statements. I do think empowering, giving flexibility and discretion to our chair, who I completely trust, I think to ensure that everyone gets equal time is good. You know, I liked Mr. Lukowski. Sorry. I hope I got it right. Did I get it right? All right.
Pretty close. Missed it by that much.
I'll work on it, my friend. Lukowski. I think his suggestions were really good as well, and I do like the ability, giving the chair the ability to potentially shorten and distribute the time fairly in view of ensuring that everybody gets a chance to ask questions. I really don't think there's any way to guarantee that people don't get cut off or that everyone gets equal time. I really think there's a large degree of uncertainty about how many interruptions, how many different side discussions will ensue. But those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Doherty, and then
Yeah. I'll just go to what I've said before, and this will be a rare circumstance that I'm agreeing with my colleague, Mr. Garrettson, I'm sure. So mark it down in the calendar that, and it's what I said earlier on.
I'm gonna go into the House and stand on a point of order so everybody knows this, Todd.
I knew you would. You'd probably tweet it out too. Listen, I again, we need to put our faith in one another that we are moving forward in a collaborative fashion, and as chair, it's chair's prerogative. We may have witnesses that are repetitive, and any way that we can give more opportunity for us to question those witnesses, I think that that's the best way of doing it. The other thing is getting their statements in advance so that we have an opportunity to review. Helps, not just table dropping when they show up. I think that gives us as committee members the opportunity to fully prepare, so that when they are before us, we can literally go and say, listen, we've read your opening statements, we have questions, and let's get right into it. And then our colleagues in the bloc and NDP can get a fair shake.
Okay, Mr. Lukiski, and then Mr. Terrien.
Yeah, just very quickly again to underscore what I was saying earlier. The whole objective, I believe, Madam Chair, is to ensure fairness for all members representing all parties. And what I would do, even for an example, if we ended up in a situation where in the second round, it looked like we certainly couldn't get through the entire second round, nor would we get to the third round, I would cut it off after both the Conservatives and Liberals talk. So in other words, I wouldn't give the Conservatives an extra question and then say we're out of time. I would try and do everything in my power to ensure we had equal amount of time for every party wherever possible. There will be times, as you well know, Madam Chair, that you may, for an example, want to have 15 minutes at the end of a meeting for committee business, and that'll have to truncate the amount of time we have for questions. So it's, again, a discretionary thing that I think we should empower you, but it's a bit of a leap of faith. I agree with that. But I think that if you do have the ability to circumvent and to cut down on the amount of time each round takes to ensure that all questions are asked wherever possible, I think probably that's the best approach we could take. Obviously, I would hope that the Bloc and the NDP parties would agree to that, because it would be doing, I guess that approach would be being done to benefit them primarily, more so than the Liberals or the Conservatives.
I appreciate that feedback, and I'll absolutely make note of that. Ms. Blaney?
So I want to thank everybody for this discussion. I think it's always important to have these conversations, and I definitely did notice in my time in the committees that I participate that more often than not, the Bloc and the New Democrats would not get a second chance, and I think that is a concern that I will, of course, now after this discussion, continue to bring up so that we don't forget this discussion. And I really appreciate Mr. Lukiski, and I hope I said that correctly, and I expect that your name will be in this Hansard more often than you've ever seen it before, based on our practicing. I understand and hear sort of how you as an independent chair made a decision. And I also understand the process that a chair works in. I have definitely worked in that role in previous work experiences. The thing that I will bring forward is that if we don't have a change in this, or we don't actually have some sort of process, it sort of continues to leave that to the discretion of every single chair. And as, of course, being PROC, we are sort of the mother committee. I think it's important for us to look at how we're going to guide other committees. And so I just want to challenge that a little bit and just say, we may want to look at that process. So I will continue to think that the NDP and the Bloc should have that spot in the middle. We don't often get to the second round of the Conservatives and the Liberals anyways. So I think even there, I'm not in any way delusional that we're going to get an opportunity to ask a second time. But hopefully what I see from this is that we actually implement something and not just have a discussion and leave it completely. And hopefully we'll just have a vote and move on.
All right, I think we can probably get to a vote very soon. So let's just hear from the last two speakers and then we will vote. Monsieur Terrien.
Merci.
Thank you very much. I heard Ms. Blenny. I didn't hear everything she had to say because there was some problem with interpretation. So what she said was not interpreted. So this shows what is happening ever since the beginning of the pandemic. Despite all of the efforts made by all stakeholders, there are problems with technology. So the debate we are having is even more important now. So the time that is being allocated is not always respected because of issues that we see, such as technology that can create delays, and sometimes the bloc and the NDP do not have as much time. I do trust the chair. She is very efficient. But in order to facilitate her work and everyone's work, I was wondering why we would not make sure that we have enough time for the second turn. If we reduce the time for witnesses, we would make sure that everyone would have a chance to speak. And from everything that I have heard so far, it seems that everyone agrees. Everyone must be able to ask questions. I am not putting the guilt on the chair. Not at all. I would like to give her some discretion so that I would like to facilitate her work. I would not want to put her in a difficult situation. She does not deserve this.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think what I could do always is, but what remains is Ms. Blaney's point also that setting actually something in place permanently so that other committees could follow it. But if it wasn't to be permanent, what I could do is, well, we could make the change like proposed about the witnesses down to 6 minutes. And then, of course, if it seems like we would be crammed on time, in the second round, we could reduce everyone down to 4 minutes so that it could be assured, guaranteed that we get to the NDP and the block questions at that point. That could always be done. And I have done that in the past as well. I've just carved time off of the other parties that have more time so that we get to the block and the NDP. So that could be done. Mr. Tuck.
Yes, and I just want to lend my support to the idea that we can do things better in the future. We can't keep doing the same things we've done and expect different results. And I think in this committee, there's been, I think if we do take some of the best parts of Blaney's and Tom's proposals, and I'd look forward to seeing what that would do for just the management of time, and especially at the end of committees, we never seem to have time for committee business. And I think if we can shorten that up a bit, we should be able to actually get more things done. So those are my comments on this issue.
Okay. So we were talking about getting to a vote. What does this look like now? Do we have a whole bunch of ideas we're going to put together and make those changes in this section? Or Ms. Blaney, would you like to go with one of the scenarios that you've put forward and vote on that, or make some amendments to that scenario?
So I would love to move the simple change of having the block and the New Democrats on the second round with their 2.5 minutes be moved between the two rounds of the Liberal and Conservative questions. And I will leave Mark to make any other motions that he may want on his own idea.
Okay, so I guess since that has been moved, should we vote on that first before any other motions are entertained? Because that may depend, unless you have a friendly amendment to make to this, or should we just vote? Okay. All right, I think seeing as there's no hands raised, we'll vote on that change. Monsieur Terrier.
Mr. Terrien. Yes. Sorry, I'm not trying to be a killjoy. But once again, when Ms. Blaney was speaking, I couldn't hear the interpreter. Apparently, there's a problem with her headset. Even though she is wearing the proper headset, the interpreter was unable to interpret. So then I can't hear anything at all. So I missed everything that she said. Now, from what I understand.
Oui, juste une seconde, juste pour dire que
Just to let you know in closing that I would like to vote on a motion, but before that, it should be amended following the discussions that we had beforehand, and also reread the motion to make sure that everybody agrees and that everybody has the same understanding. Many people spoke to the motion, and I want to make sure that we all are thinking the same thing.
Here,
Yeah.
I've gotten word here in the room that there does seem to be an audio problem with Miss Blaney's mic. I don't know, Miss Blaney, if you could maybe try to unplug it and replug it back into your computer to see if that might address the issue. Because the interpreters were also having some difficulty understanding.
Miss Blaney, you're on mute. Are you speaking?
Okay, so I've unplugged it and plugged it back in. Is that better?
Can you just speak for just a couple more seconds and we'll see with the interpreters if they're getting a better sound quality. One moment, please. Ms. Blaney, if you can just say a few more words to see if the interpreters can understand a bit better.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, I came in and did the sound check and it was fine then, so I'm not sure what happened, but I have plugged it in and unplugged it.
They're giving me a thumbs up now, so hopefully that might be better, and Monsieur Terrien va avoir une meilleure qualité de son aussi.
Hopefully, Mr. Terrien will be able to hear everything you've said henceforth.
Okay, I will clarify a little bit of how we're proceeding. Sorry, I went on mute myself. I'll clarify the motion that's being moved by Ms. Blaney. I don't think there's any amendments to this motion at this time. We'll see if it passes or not, and then changes can be entertained if it does not. Okay, so right now, Ms. Blaney's motion, what it essentially does, Monsieur Terrien, is take, in that second round, it takes the 2.5 minutes of the block questioning and the 2.5 minutes of the NDP questioning and puts it in the middle of the conservative liberal 5 minutes. You would have conservative, liberal, bloc, NDP, and then you would have conservative, liberal again. So you're just moving them up to 2 spots. So that's the motion that's being moved right now, and we're going to have a vote on that.
So that's for scenario 1, correct?
Is that scenario 1 or 2, correct? That's what I want to ask as well.
Madame Blaney, is that scenario 1 or 2? I don't have the scenarios in front of me right now. I'm going to open that up on another screen.
I believe it is
that is scenario 1.
That is scenario 1.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Clerk, could you help us with the vote? Is everyone in favor of scenario 1? All in favor, I guess?
No, I think we need a recorded vote.
Okay.
Okay. The question is on Miss Blaney's motion. Mr. Algabra.
No. Sorry, it took me a while to unmute myself.
Miss Duncan.
No.
Mr. Garrettson.
No.
Mr. Finnegan.
No.
Mr.
No.
No.
Mr. Doherty.
Yes.
Mr. Lakiski.
Oui.
Yes.
Mr. Tucker.
Yes.
Ms. Vecchio.
Yes.
Monsieur Terrien.
Yes.
Ms. Blaney.
Yes.
Madam Chair, motion is carried.
Okay. So the questioning time has been changed for the second, or the questioning order has been changed for the second round to place the Bloc and the NDP in the middle of after the Conservatives and the Liberals question. As to the other issue that came up about the 10 minutes for statements, opening statements, would anyone like to move that change?
I would like to put forward a motion, Madam Chair.
Okay, Mr. Gerritsen.
I'd like to put forward the motion that in the second round, we swap the second Conservative and Liberal spot so that it would go New Democratic Party 2.5, Liberal 5 minutes, Conservative 5 minutes.
Sorry, could you repeat yourself? What?
So in the scenario 1, which has now been, we've now amended it. It goes Conservative 5, Liberal 5, Bloc 2.5, New Democratic 2.5, Conservative 5, Liberal 5. And what I'm saying is that the last two be swapped. So it goes Liberal 5, Conservative 5.
You lose. No.
Ah, okay. I see what you're saying. Okay. Ms. Vecchio.
I'm just wondering if you could give me a little background on Mark. What is the benefit to any opposition party supporting that? Is it just more questions for the Liberals? I just want to get a little bit more feedback on that.
I don't understand. Well, I mean, I think that you know, you'll make your decision as to whether or not you want to support it. I'm not presupposing that you won't, but I think that it's important that you know, that in order to be as fair as possible, we do it this way, because the reality is there's one extra member on the Liberal side. So, you know, if we're talking about fairness, we don't even actually end up having, you know, all of our people getting to ask questions, whereas, you know, we're seeing it otherwise on the other side. People are getting more time than, you know, the composition of members, if you were to factor that in.
Ruby, can I take the? I'm just wondering if you're answering from the list or how you're going to do this.
Maybe if you could just take a 30-second pause. I'm just going to confer with the clerk on a couple of things before we move forward. Okay, so procedurally, there may be some issues with Mr. Gerritsen's motion at this point, because scenario 1, which we've all voted, which the committee has voted and adopted at this point, gives the order for questioning in that second round. But you know, the clerk could jump in as well and help explain whether there is an issue with understanding of what we've just passed.
Yes, so I was just talking to the chair, and Miss Blaney moved a motion for the rounds of questions that specifically set out how that would proceed, and the committee, the majority of the committee adopted that. So that essentially sort of brings to an end. That's the decision of the committee to proceed on that basis for the rounds of questions. Now, there seemed to be some suggestion from other members to attempt to further amend that. If that is the will of the committee would first need to undo the decision that they just made.
As a point of order, Madam Chair.
Now, if I can just finish, Mr. Gerritsen, had the motion from Ms. Blaney been defeated, then there'd be no problem to move a further suggestion or a different variation.
Okay, just as a point of order, Madam Chair, that's not my interpretation of it. What Ms. Blaney did, and you can go back and check the blues, she said to take 2 and move them into another location in the speaking order. I did not interpret her motion to be saying that it may have affected the 2 spots afterwards, but it certainly was not, she didn't touch those 2 spots. She just moved the last 2 and bumped them forward by 2. I did not interpret that to mean that we were done talking about that particular issue.
Justin, could that be an interpretation? I could foresee that. And Mr. Lukiski, we'll have you speak next.
Now, Madam Chair, or did you want to go to the clerk first?
The clerk first, please.
I apologize, Madam Chair. My sense from Ms. Blaney was that she was moving a motion to adopt the routine motion as she set it out, and then the committee voted on it. If I made a mistake, I apologize, but that was sort of the understanding I had.
But if that's the case, then why are we even discussing the time at the beginning? Because that's part of the routine motion. If what the clerk is saying, Madam Chair, then we've just adopted the entire thing. I was under the impression it was an amendment to the motion, which is to move 2 of the items in there. Because if what you're saying is correct, Mr. Clerk, and I'm really not trying to entertain debate with you, but if what you're saying is correct, then we're done this routine motion, and there's no sense continuing to talk about it.
My understanding was that the witness portion and the first round hadn't been touched, and so that's how I felt that it was just about. You're correct, Mr. Gerritsen. My understanding is similar to your understanding, and that's why I was saying that we could move on to the issue of the witness statements, which is also within this motion.
Okay, I guess I can always come back to this later on, because we can always change our stuff later on if necessary through a motion. Then I will withdraw that motion, Madam Chair, and I would propose that we change the introduction times to, or the opening statements from 10 minutes to 6 minutes.
I don't think we've resolved what we've just, the can of worms we've just opened up.
I withdrew the motion.
Yeah, he withdrew his motion,
Okay.
Madam Chair, so
I withdrew that motion and put forward the other one that you were getting at.
Okay, and Mr. Clerk, just to clarify that it would be okay to move a change to the opening statement time at this point?
Yes, you can go ahead. I apologize. I was confused by Ms. Blaney's motion, so it can be treated as an amendment. That section has been dealt with, and now you're on to a different part of that same motion. Again, I apologize for the confusion to the committee.
Okay. That's the can of worms I was talking about, because I wasn't sure whether we had clarified if it was just for that particular part. Okay, so Mr. Gerritsen.
I'll put forward the motion I'll put forward a motion, Madam Chair, that we change the opening statements from 10 minutes to 6 minutes.
Okay. And Mr. Lukiski, did you want to speak to this section of the motion?
Just briefly, more of a question, I guess, than anything to Mark. Mark, do you think that 6 minutes is correct, or would 5 give even more latitude in case we start the meeting late, which happens quite frequently virtually? But if I have no issue with 6 minutes, I think I would prefer 5, just to build in a bit of a buffer. But it's your emotion, so I support either one.
I appreciate that suggestion, and it's probably better, because if you tell people 5 and then it goes over by a few minutes, I think you're absolutely right. So I'll accept that friendly amendment.
Okay, Mr. Doherty.
Yeah, I would accept that as well too, and I would request that all witnesses prepare and present to the committee in advance their opening remarks written.
Okay, and so do you want that language to be inserted into the motion?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I'm happy. It doesn't have to be an amendment to the amendment. I'm happy to just insert that as well. That all witnesses are requested to provide within 72 hours, so that it can be translated. 72 hours their opening statements in writing.
Justin.
Madam Chair, I just would like to let the members of the committee know. In the past, we've encouraged witnesses to provide their opening statements ahead of time so that they can be distributed. Frequently, issues arose over having opening statements translated in enough time to be able to distribute it to the committee. Part of it is in relation to the invitation to witnesses. Frequently, invitations to witnesses are proffered in a very short timeline, sometimes even less than 72 hours. And so certain kinds of deadlines for submission of opening statements are not always possible. There can be language in the routine motions that perhaps suggest best efforts, but we have had those issues in the past, and then what has happened is that the opening statement has not been able to be provided to the committee.
So in light of that, Madam Chair, why don't I just say whenever possible, and then what I said. So whenever possible, witnesses provide their opening statements in writing no later than 72 hours before the meeting begins.
I think that would be wise rather than locking ourselves in, because we have had challenges, and the clerk is right. With some of the studies, we have to sometimes swap days, or things change last minute, and it becomes difficult. Okay, so does everybody have clarity as to what we are voting on? The opening statements in the first part of the time for opening remarks and questioning of witnesses in that motion. Witnesses will be given 5 minutes for their opening statements. That at the discretion of the chair during questioning of witnesses, there be allocated. Okay, and then the rest of it remains the same, and we're also going to insert Justin, where would you insert? I think at the end of statement, that's where you should, I guess, insert that witnesses, where possible, witnesses should provide their remarks, opening statement remarks in writing to the committee 72 hours in advance. And then the remainder would stay the same. Monsieur Terrien?
If witnesses do not give it 72 hours in advance, are they prevented from being a witness? It's not an obligation.
When witnesses can. So we're encouraging it, I guess, more strongly encouraging it this time, even though it has always been encouraged. We're just memorializing it and putting it into the routine motions. Yes, Mr. Turnbull.
Madam Chair, I just want to be 100% clear on what we vote on, just because there was a little confusion on that last one. Could we just have it read out before we vote, please, just so we're all 100% clear?
Okay. Justin, would you mind reading it out?
Okay, so this would be on essentially the amendment that Mr. Garrettson is proposing, that witnesses be given 10 minutes for their opening statement, and that whenever possible, witnesses provide their opening statements 72 hours before their appearance, semicolon, then that at the discretion of the chair during the questioning of witnesses, there be allocated 6 minutes for the first questioner of each party as follows, and then we have the list of the rounds of questions.
I think, Madam Chair, I believe what Mark's amendment or Mark's motion was 5-minute opening statements, not 10. The 6-minute, 5-minute, 2.5-minute round after that is fine, but the whole purpose of Mark's motion was to cut down the opening statements from 10 minutes to 5 minutes.
Yes,
that's right, 5 minutes. I apologize.
Yeah, I think he misspoke. Sorry.
Madam Chair, I believe we lost Mark. Apparently the internet cut on him and he's trying to reboot, so just...
okay. Since it is his motion, we'll just pause for a moment. Dr. Duncan? Yeah. Dr. Duncan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could we just have clarification? I want to thank Mr. Lukiski for clarifying the opening statement. Can we just have clarification once again on the timing for each of the rounds, please?
Yes. So the witness would be given 5 minutes. The remainder will stay the same, where the Conservative Party, the Liberal Party, the Bloc Party, the Bloc Québécois, and the New Democratic Party would each have 6 minutes each. in the first round. The only thing being changed is the opening statement, which is being brought down to 5 minutes. And then also there's going to be language inserted encouraging the witness to provide a written statement wherever possible. Mr. Turnbull.
And the second round is, could you clarify just to make sure we're all clear as well?
The second round is Conservative 5 minutes, Liberals 5 minutes, Bloc Québécois 2.5 minutes, NDP 2.5 minutes, and then the Conservatives 5 minutes. Sorry, did I say that right? Conservatives 5 minutes, Liberals 5 minutes, Bloc Québécois 2.5 minutes, NDP 2.5 minutes, and then the Conservatives 5 minutes, and then the Liberals 5 minutes. Was that everyone's understanding?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Trimble.
Just from the top again, because I'm still, because it was a little choppy, I just want to make sure I know what I'm voting on. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, from the beginning of the motion to the end of the motion. So I'm just gonna, all the numbers, all relevant numbers, we're replacing the first 10-minute opening statement with 5 minutes for an opening statement. Then there will be a round of 6-minute questions, which will go to the Conservatives, Liberals, Bloc, and then NDP, 6 minutes each. Then we go into the second round. The second round is Conservatives, 5 minutes, Liberal, 5 minutes, Bloc Québécois, 2.5 minutes, NDP, 2.5 minutes, and then Conservative, 5 minutes, and Liberal, 5 minutes. Is that everyone's understanding as well? Okay, and that is clear.
Madam Chair, I was disconnected. Sorry, I had to reboot. The internet wasn't working on my Surface here. Did
Yes,
we vote on? We
no,
vote on
no.
the amendment?
No, of course not. We
Okay.
did notice your absence, and we have
Mr. Doherty was probably first to notice, right?
I can't remember who it was, but he was very worried as well. And we paused and we're just clarifying. So what we're voting on right now will be your motion of changing the opening statement to 5 minutes and then inserting the language of requiring or encouraging the witnesses to present a written statement 72 hours in advance. And then after that, the first round of allocated questioning slots will be 6 minutes each. Conservative Party, Liberal Party, Bloc Québécois, and NDP. That is the order of that first round. And that's basically all your motion would effect.
Put it to a vote, Madam Chair. Put it
Okay.
to a vote.
Okay. All right, we'll have a recorded vote.
Okay, this is on the amendment of Mr. Garrettson. Mr. Algabra.
Yes.
Ms. Duncan.
Yes.
Mr. Garrettson.
Yes.
Mr. Finnegan.
Oui.
Mr. Turnbull.
Yes.
Mr. Doherty.
Oui.
Mr. Lakiski.
Yes.
Mr. Tucker.
Yes.
Ms. Vecchio.
Yes.
Mr. Terrien.
Oui.
Yes.
Ms. Blaney.
Yes.
Okay, carried.
All right, Ms. Vecchio.
Thank you. Have we finished through the routine proceedings?
No, we have working meals still to go back to, and then
okay, fantastic.
And then we'll be done. Yeah.
I just wanted to find out on that agenda piece. So we're working on working meals. Got it.
Madam Chair,
Yes?
so we've now adopted Mr. Garrettson's amendment.
Oh, now
Miss Blaney's amendment was adopted before that. Now the formality of putting the whole question on the motion as amended is needed.
Okay.
So I'll call the members. This question is on the motion as amended. Mr. Algabra.
Yes.
Ms. Duncan.
Yes.
Mr. Garrettson,
Yes.
Mr. Finnegan,
Oui.
Mr. Turnbull,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty,
Yes.
Mr. Lakiski,
We.
Mr. Tucker,
Yes.
Ms. Vecchio,
Yes.
Monsieur Terrien.
Oui.
Yes.
Motion as amended adopted.
Okay, thank you. Now we can move on to working meals. All right, Ms. Blaney?
So I think my point was basically that now that we will be moving into a hybrid model, I think it would be respectful for members to alert the clerk in the appropriate time if they would be physically present, so that the clerk is not put in a position of having to order more meals than are required. I think it's a good savings of money, which is always important to New Democrats, regardless of what conservatives may say. And I had to bug you, Todd. Come on. And I think it's just respectful to the process. So I just wanted to bring that, and because we could again do this thing where every committee sort of does what it wants, or we could see the clerk not knowing and having to order for everyone. I think it would be respectful if there was a timeline that you had to let the clerk know if you would be participating. And love to hear people's thoughts on that, and would love to hear from the clerk if there is an ideal timeline for that process as well.
Yeah, I think this one is really a question for Justin, whether there's a particular timeline you need in order to order the meals. Right now, well, today, I guess we're not working over the lunch hour, but um, in the past, we weren't ordering meals either when we were doing the virtual committees. We had stopped ordering meals during that time, I believe. Is that correct, Justin?
Madam Chair, yes, we haven't ordered any meals during any of the virtual meetings. So the last catered meals we've had were early March.
Yeah. So what would be the plan going forward at this point to say even for the support staff that is there, and if it's over the lunch hour, would you be ordering a working meal for everybody, regardless of whether any members are present or not, or how would that work?
Well, I could let the committee know a little bit more about the timelines associated with ordering the food. Generally, the house catering providers require 48 hours notice before a meeting for a catered committee meal. So that would generally be what we're looking for. In the past, when the committee meets in person all together, we tend to have a standing order, which feeds, approximately speaking, the 12 members of the committee as well, and then there are a few extra meals for staff, or that they can also eat. So we tend to order the food, I guess, several weeks ahead of time, and it's a standing order for every committee meeting that we have over the lunch hour. In this case, needing to know when members would be in person, I would essentially be needing to know a full 2 days before the meeting if you would be appearing in person or virtually, which may create an imposition on your own scheduling for your own time. But if that is what the committee is interested in putting into the routine motion, to have a set a timeline, it would be at least 48 hours before the meeting that I would need to know.
Okay, or so Ms. Blaney, would you like to put the time in place? And I think there's some hands up we can hear from the other members. Essentially what it would do, I guess the clerk wouldn't be required to order the food, and you could just get your own food if you do happen to show up in person. I guess that's essentially what would be the effect of this. Mr. Garrettson, Mr. Turnbull, and then Mr. Doherty.
I was just going to say, Madam Chair, what you just kind of concluded on there, which is that Mr. Clerk, I imagine what would be delivered would be the same stuff that is prepared and packaged up individually that we get out of the second floor room that's next to the opposition lobby. So, I mean, I think that if we want to authorize the clerk to get a few meals as required for the support staff, if that's the regular custom, then we should do that. But in terms of members, I mean, our meetings, if you're in person, they're going to be in West Block, so we have access to that same room that everybody who's on house duty is going to. So why we wouldn't just bring our own meal if we were in person? I think that I would rather that approach than me have to try to remember with everything else going on, whether or not I have to tell the clerk 48 hours in advance of my presence or absence. So that would be my preference. But if we insist on doing it where we have to tell the clerk, then I would suggest that the default be no, and that you have to tell him, yes, you are going to be there, so that we don't end up having a number of meals that are there because somebody forgot to say they weren't going to be there.
Madam Chair, if I could just add for the committee's information, the catered meals, well, occasionally when there's leftover food, support staff can have access to that. The catered meals in terms of what the committee is authorized to cover is for the members' benefit, for the members' use. And if I may further sort of just suggest that the suggestion that Mr. Garrettson put forward, that can also be used as a bit of an informal arrangement that the committee has so as not to create an issue with the scheduling of the members in terms of needing to figure out 40 hours ahead of time if you'll be present in person for the meeting or not.
Okay, so you're essentially saying that we could do this informally and have this rule without changing the routine motion. Mr. Turnbull, Mr. Doherty, and then Mr. Terrien.
That was what I was going to suggest, actually, is I was going to just ask why this has to be embedded in the routine motions and couldn't be common courtesy and an informal practice that we agree to, which I think makes perfect sense, that that we let people know if we know we're going to be physically present, that we actually confirm that we're going to be there, and that way the clerk can order the amount of food that's appropriate. I guess if it had to be embedded, it could be like with the 72 hours notice for written opening statements being submitted. It could be wherever possible or whenever possible. I think so those are two options. One is, can we just have an informal agreement among us, or if it has to be embedded, can we just put the caveat in front of it whenever possible?
Mr. Doherty?
Same, as somebody that doesn't really partake in our meals at the house. Anyways, as long as there's coffee and water, I'm good. So I think it's on us as adults to inform the our whip's office, who is working with the clerks and our team, to let them know whether we're going to be there or not. And really the really important stuff is the coffee and water. So I'm good with whatever is done. So,
Mr. Terrien?
Yes, well, during COVID, some people are losing their jobs. Some people are going through various difficulties. And so I consider that perhaps we should set aside or remove the lunches and just get our own, given that we are all meeting virtually and given the current situation. I think we should lead by example and send a message that we are lucky to have a job, very lucky, and that we are able to get our own food.
Absolutely. And this motion, I believe, it only really gives the clerk authorization. It gives him the discretion. The ball is really in his court, whether he's ordering anything or nothing, which we have been ordering nothing for the last several months that we were sitting as a committee virtually. it's not that it must be done or anything like that. So would anyone like to move a formal motion or an amendment to this motion at this point, or do you want to just leave it as is? Yes.
Just well, I just have a question before that, Madam Chair. Are what we doing here going to be a precedent for all committees with this? Because if it is, then I think that it's important. And if that's the case, then I would agree. I mean, I agree regardless, but with what Mr. Therian just said, but I think it's even more important that we put it in a motion rather than just an understanding so that we can be sending this message down to the other committees through precedent.
It's just a message. They still have to move their own routine motions and pass them within each committee. So
you're muted.
You're muted, Ruby. You're muted.
It could serve as an idea for them or an inspiration, but it doesn't mean they have to do what we've done.
Well, I'm happy to move something to the effect of what Mr. Therian was proposing, unless he wants to do it. But I'm happy with a motion to the effect that until such time that the House returns to its, normal practices, that we discontinue the lunch purchasing practice, and hopefully other committees will pick up on that and do the same thing. Because what he said is absolutely correct, and I agree 100%.
Okay, Ms. Blaney.
And if I may, this is exactly why I brought this forward, because without clarity, the clerk may feel obligated, and it's also hybrid. So the clerks will not know how many people are going to show up. So with a lack of clarity becomes a huge area of void. And we are, the mother committee. So I think our guidance is helpful. Of course, exactly like the chair said, it does not necessarily mean all the other committees will follow us, but a lack of clarity is often just an area for confusion. And I would be happy to support a motion if Mr. Therian put it forward.
Okay. Would someone like to formally put this motion forward? Yes, Justin?
Yeah, sorry, Madam Chair. I just wanted to just make the point that your point about the discretion that I have as the clerk is true, is discretionary. The habit of ordering standing catered lunches for PROC was one that came about because there was an interest in doing that when the entire committee was in the same room together. This type of routine motion in the past has also been used occasionally, for example, when the committee is meeting in person and sitting very late on a vote marathon or sitting late into the evening, and there's the need to bring food in for the members so that they don't have to suspend while they're doing their work, and they can continue during their work and yet still permit me, after I've been directed to do so, to order in, for example, some pizzas or something to allow the committee to continue doing their work. The motion as it is can be that way. Informally, the arrangement can be changed so that I would only ever order food in when I am directed to do so by the chair, for example. You can also, if you want, change the wording of this motion to explicitly say that I would essentially only be doing this, ordering in food, when I'm explicitly directed to do so by the committee or by the chair.
Yeah, I like that idea because I'm sensing from the clerk he doesn't like how we're boxing him in because this motion really just allows him the ability to do it. Doesn't mean he has to do it each and every meeting. So I think the suggestion that was just made right now that adding language saying that, we leave this language in, huh?
But it's not sending the message. It's not sending a message. And I think that's important. But was Mr. Therian about to move a motion? I think he was before the clerk started talking.
I don't think so. I think we were just asking him to move one. I don't know if he was. Monsieur Therian?
I had not had the time to answer, but I could table a motion, but I have not written it down. But it would be to say during the pandemic, given the hybrid parliament, we consider that the PROC committee must suspend the ordering of meals. And if members want to have a meal, they can ask their assistant and they can pay for the meal themselves. So during the pandemic, that PROC suspend the ordering of meals delivered to the members of the committee.
Not that I'm there to eat any of these meals really right now, and I'm most likely going to be mostly virtual, but there could be a situation where we have to all be there in person in some meetings, and I feel the wording of that motion was very absolute, and there might not be a place on the Hill to purchase any food. Like, we don't know whether the cafeteria hours may be changed, and we may need to authorize the clerk to order in that circumstance, and I feel it's just too rigid. Perhaps a wording that would, I know at the end of the day, it's up to you. And if you've moved it, then I'll allow obviously a vote on that. But I just wanted to make that comment so everyone is sure about what they end up voting on before we do. Ms. Vecchio.
Right now, I just think we're getting so lost in the weeds right now that we're not focusing on some really important things. I recognize that we all know that we're out of the job. And just like Mr. Tarian said, it's really, really important. I think we should just use our common sense hats. And until things are over, we just don't order meals. It's that simple. And it's just more of it doesn't have to be a formal motion. It just has to be common sense. That's all. I recognize that Mark wants to send this as a message down to the rest of the committees. I think common sense, we shouldn't have to tell the other members of parliament to use common sense. It should just be a good practice as we're going through this pandemic. Passing.
I agree. That would probably be a little bit my preference.
And I agree too.
Okay. We could still do it with less harsh language, I guess. We could do it without, I think what the clerk had suggested earlier, that unless the committee or the chair requests the clerk to do so, we don't have meals until that time. Something like that. That's a little bit less rigid.
Let's just move on, Madam Chair, if we can.
Madam Chair, and I apologize to belabor it again. As of right now, if the motion that's in the list isn't adopted, I have no authority to order any meal at all, which would be the effect I think that the committee is looking for. So the option could essentially be is to simply not adopt this motion, and no food. I wouldn't be authorized to order any food. You'd all be left to your own devices to bring a meal in or prepare food with you. Bring food with you when you do come to committee if that's what you needed, as opposed to moving a separate motion indicating that no food will be provided during the pandemic.
Yeah, that is a good, fair point. Very good point. Mr. Turnbull and then Mr. Gerritsen.
I just have another suggestion. What if we were to take this clause and add on the end of it for members that have confirmed their presence? And that way the clerk is authorized to do so, but only for members that have confirmed their presence.
Agreed.
Okay. So you were going to remove the wording committee and its subcommittees and just add or you're going to add
No, just it would read the same, but it would
Okay.
say for the committee and its subcommittee members that have confirmed their presence.
Subcommittee
You could say
members that have
confirmed their physical presence if you want to be clear, because virtual presence now counts.
Yeah.
So maybe we would say physical presence. Okay.
Members that have confirmed their physical presence.
Call the question.
Okay.
Mr. Algabra.
Yes.
Ms. Duncan.
Yes.
Mr. Gerritsen.
Yes.
Mr. Finnegan.
Oui.
Mr. Turnbull.
Yes.
Mr. Doherty.
Yes.
Mr. Lakiski.
Yes.
Mr. Tucker.
Yes.
Ms. Vecchio.
Yes.
Mr. Terrien.
Yes.
Ms. Blaney.
Yes.
Motion is carried.
Okay. Yes, we're through the routine motions. Sorry, guys. I know that that may have taken a little longer than you expected, but I have seen it where it's taken weeks as well. So it's not too bad, not the worst case scenario. Okay, there are different studies that I think the committee would be interested in looking at, and I could walk you through some of the studies that have been suggested, that we suggested as a committee. Yes?
Ms. Hoda, I have raised my hand. I would like to move a motion, please.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Vecchio.
Thank you very much. And Garrettson, hopefully I'll only do it in less than 6 minutes. That anticipation of the committee receiving an order of reference pursuant to standing
We amended
order
that to 5 minutes.
32.7, no later than the 20th sitting day of the present session, the committee shall consider the document outlining the government's response or reasons for the latest prorogation, and in preparation for that study, A, invite the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, and the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Diversity and Inclusion of Youth, and the Leader of the Government in the House of Commons, each to appear separately before the committee for at least 3 hours, provided that in each of them who does not agree within 1 week of the adoption of this motion to accept this invitation for the length of time prescribed. The chair shall be instructed to report to the House with a recommendation that this committee be empowered to order his or her appearance from time to time. B, an order of the committee due issue for all memorandums, emails, documents, notes, or other records from the Prime Minister's office and the Privy Council office since June 25th of 2020 concerning options, plans, and preparations for the prorogation of Parliament, provided that these documents shall be provided to the clerk of the committee within 10 days of the adoption of this motion. C, an order of the committee due issue for a record of all communications between the government and any of the We Charity or its affiliated organizations, Craig Kilberger, Mark Kilberger, Speaker Spotlight, Rob Silver, or MCAP, since June 25th, 2020, in respect of the prorogation of Parliament, provided that these documents shall be provided to the clerk of the committee within 10 days of the adoption of this motion. D, an order of the committee due issue to We Charity, including its affiliated organizations, Craig Kilberger, Mark Kilberger, and Speaker Spotlight for all memoranda, emails, documents, notes, or other records since June 25th, 2020, concerning the prorogation of Parliament, provided that these documents shall be provided to the clerk of the committee within 10 days of the adoption of this motion. E, an order of the committee due issue for the unredacted version of the documents provided the government in response to the July 7th, 2020 order of the Standing Committee on Finance, provided that these documents shall be provided to the clerk of the committee within 24 hours of the adoption of this motion. F, an order of the committee due issue to each member of the cabinet, including the Prime Minister, and to the Honourable Bill Marneau, requiring that they prepare and make a return to the clerk of the committee within 10 days of the adoption of this motion, indicating the date and summary of each communication they or a member of the ministerial exempt staff or a volunteer in their ministerial exempt staff ministerial office had between March 1st and April 22nd of 2020 with Mark Kilberger, Craig Kilberger, We Charity or its affiliated organizations, or any employee, agent, or representative of them, to providing all records of the communications referred to in paragraph 1. G, an order of the committee due issue to require the government to prepare and to make a return to the clerk of the committee within 10 days of the adoption of this motion, indicating 1, what criteria were used to public servants to determine that only We Charity could deliver this Canada Student Service Grant. 2, which individuals were responsible for designing the parameters of the Canada Student Service Grant. 3, who was present at any meeting where the parameters of the Canada Student Service Grant were discussed. And 4, whether the Canada Student Service Grant was approved through the ordinary Treasury Board submissions process, and if not, what were the variations were. H, an order of the committee due issue to We Charity, including its affiliated organizations, Craig Kilberger and Mark Kilberger, to prepare and make a return to the clerk of the committee within 10 days of the adoption of this motion, indicating every corporation, trust, charity, association, entity, or individual, including, for greater certainty, those affiliated with We Charity and We Charity Foundation shared or intended to share data concerning the Canada Student Service Grant. I, an order of the committee due issue to Craig Kilberger, Mark Kilberger, Fred Kilberger, Teresa Kilberger, Dalla Alwaldi, Scott Baker, and Victor Lee, to prepare and to make a return to the clerk of the committee within 10 days of the adoption of this motion, indicating the name of each corporation, trust, charity, association, or entity in which each of them is or have been at any time since January 1st of 2015, a member, director, or officer, together with 1, the name of the jurisdiction in which is incorporated, 2, the office in which is held by the person completing the return, including the date the office was assumed and its relevant vacated, 3, the relationship it has to any other organization named in the return, and 4, the name of any subsidiary it owns or controls. J, an order of the committee do issue to We Charity, including its affiliated organizations, and National Public Relations for any contract between those organizations pertaining to the delivery of the Canada Student Service Grant, together with all memoranda, emails, documents, notes, or others records related to the negotiation, implementation, and termination of that contract, provided that these documents shall be provided to the clerk of the committee within 3 weeks of the adoption of this motion. K, an order of the committee do issue to Speaker Spotlight for a copy of all records pertaining to speaking appearances arranged since October 14th of 2008 for Justin Trudeau, Sophie Gregoire Trudeau, Margaret Trudeau, and Alexandra Trudeau, including in respect of each speaking appearance, an indication of the fee provided, any expenses that were reimbursed, and the name of the company, organization, person, or entity booking it, which has been originally ordered to be produced on July 22nd of 2020 by the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy, and Ethics, provided that these documents shall be provided to the clerk of the committee within 24 hours of adoption of this motion. L, an order to the committee do issue for any memoranda, emails, documents, notes, or other records, including cabinet papers in the care, custody, or control of the government or the Honourable Bill Morneau, related to program design for the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance and the subsidy contracts entered into by MCAP for the delivery of that program, provided these documents shall be provided to the clerk of the committee within 3 weeks of the adoption of this motion. M, an order of the committee to do issue for all memoranda, emails, documents, notes, or other records, including cabinet papers in the care, custody, or control of the government or of the Honourable Bill Morneau, related to Rob Silver's lobbying or other representations on behalf of MCAP, and amendments to the Income Tax Act pertaining to the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, provided that these documents shall be provided to the clerk of the committee within 3 weeks of the adoption of this motion. N, an order the committee do issue to each member of the cabinet, including the Prime Minister and the Honourable Bill Morneau, requiring that they prepare and make a return to the clerk of the committee within 10 days of the adoption of this motion. 1, indicating the date and summary of each communication they, a member of the ministerial exempt staff, or a volunteer in their ministerial office has since January 1st of 2020 with Rob Silver, and 2, providing all records of the communications referred to in paragraph 1. And O, all documents and returns provided to the clerk of the committee under this order shall be published on the committee's website as soon as practical upon receipt. Madam Chair, we have taken the opportunity, and we have sent this to all of the other members' whips that will be in both official languages. These are just things that were outstanding after the prorogation and things that we just are calling back on so that we can look at, as I indicated, the prorogation study that must come after some of the standing orders that have been changed back in 2017-18 by this government. So we're just starting to ask for these documents to prepare ourselves for when we're going to have this discussion. Thank you, and I'll pass the floor on.
I'm going to take back what I said about the meals. I think we're going to need the meals because we're going to be here a while.
Okay. No, that was long. I just got an email simultaneously in the middle of some of what was just said. I wanted to know, Ms. Vecchio, if you could, because a lot was said there, help me better understand how this motion or this study request is within PROC's mandate. So if you could clarify that for me.
Turning the floor to me. Some of the things that we're looking at is one of the standing orders that was changed, of course, back in the 42nd Parliament was the fact of prorogation. I think like many Canadians, when this government prorogated just last month, as everybody was coming into the fold of everything that was happening with the scandals, we recognized that the government kind of just stopped on a certain date. We also know that there's certain documents that were going to be sent in that were expected just one day after, including some of the people that were supposed to be coming to either the Ethics Committee or to the Finance Committee. We recognize that through this prorogation, what ended up happening by worrying more about the skin in the game of the Prime Minister, we forgot about Canadians and forgot about the fact that there are so many things going on, like the fact that we're trying to pull through legislation on Bill C2 and C4. We want to look at this to see why was there prorogation at a time in which it was so imperative to make sure that we're actually helping Canadians during this pandemic. So that is one of the things that I'm looking at. And in the Procedures and House Affairs Committee, our job is to make sure that all things are kept accountable and putting this all on the floor. So as the grandfather of the committee for the House of Commons, that is why I think it is our duty to make sure that what this prorogation did and the impact to all of the committee work that was done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vecchio. We do have a speakers list that has started on this request. So, Mr. Turnbull.
I was actually I was going to propose a different study that we undertake something on virtual voting, which is but I think I'll take myself off the speakers list for now, and I'll let my other colleagues go forward. I still don't see how this is relevant for PROC. Given Ms. Vecchio's comments, I would really just ask for clarification if this seems relevant to other committees perhaps, but certainly not this one, in my view.
Okay. I'm happy. Oh, do you want me to answer that question or after?
Just a moment. Yeah, I too was going to go through a list of things that we could be thinking about as this committee starts, but I guess this is what has been put forth. I don't know if we'll get around to, I don't know, I'll try to better understand the procedure and notice requirement for this at this point, but we can definitely discuss it. We do have time until 5:30. And seeing as there's a list growing, I'll just get to that. Ms. Vecchio, I think maybe, did you want to respond to that or you want to take a few, because I have a feeling there's going to be a couple of questions and
well,
perhaps you can.
I think what we can look at is, and I fully understand where you're coming from, Mr. Turnbull, fully understand that. But, you know, part of the job of the Procedures and House Affairs Committee is being that governing body of all of the other committees looking to see what's going forward. Our job is also, under the standing orders, part of that was looking at the reason for prorogation, that we should be expecting that the government will have that response within 20 sitting days of this session beginning. So we're already into this. All we're asking for is, we want the documents that support the reason for prorogation, and that is the request that we have made today. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. Mr. Garrettson.
With all due respect to Ms. Vecchio's recent comments there, you're assuming that prorogation is about the we issue. That's an assumption that you're making in order to justify the rest of it. I think it's quite ironic that here we are talking about what's important to Canadians, and somehow, you know, this is the issue top of mind when Ontario recorded today the highest number of COVID infections, the highest number of new COVID infections reported in a single day since this outbreak started being monitored. Somehow, the opposition, at least the official opposition at this point, thinks that this is top of mind for Canadians. You know, I understand. I respect the role of the opposition. I know what they want to do here. I would probably be doing the same thing if I was in their position in terms of trying to get answers to what they see as you know, very important questions. But you know, along the lines of what Mr. Turnbull said, I can't understand how this particular motion falls before this committee. Yes, a number of committees effectively came to a close when the prorogation started. Those committees can re-request for that information very easily. It doesn't have to go through this committee. It certainly doesn't have to come back to this committee. But more importantly, and you know, as a matter of procedure, I understand that the motion was distributed to us just as it was being read out by Ms. Vecchio. I got the email notification at the same time, so well done. It was extremely well planned. But the problem here is that you're springing this on a committee And you were reading it really fast, Ms. Vecchio. So I mean, I was trying to listen to what you're saying as you were reading it. I recognize the fact that you've provided it to us, but there's such an incredibly huge amount of detail in here that I, for one, cannot vote on this now without at least having the opportunity to go through it. I wish I could be spending my time on other things like, talking about what Canadians really want right now. What they want is security. They want to be alleviated of anxiety. They want to understand and to know that their government and their parliament is here for them to take care of them right now. They, in my humble opinion, this is not top of mind for them. Yes, there's questions that the opposition deserves to get answers to, and in due course that can happen. But I mean, I'm, Madam Speaker, I need more time to look at this. I'm certainly not in a position to vote on this right now. We have literally 14 minutes before this meeting is scheduled to come to an end. There's a ton of information here. I was going to ask Ms. Vecchio if she could read it to us again, but much slower so we could hear it, with some clarity. So, you put me on the list again to speak later if necessary, Madam Speaker, because I mean, I need more time before I can vote on this. I certainly would, number one, like to read it thoroughly, understand it all thoroughly, caucus with my colleagues properly to discuss it with them, to see if, we want to have an amendment on one part or another. And I think that, I know Ms. Vecchio has been around Parliament for a while, understands the rules, has been involved in a lot of committees, and you certainly, although this is committee business and she's entirely entitled to do so, you don't spring a motion like this on a committee just on the fly like this and expect everybody to vote on it, unless, of course, you pre-planned this, and it was planned very well with the way that email went out. So in any event, I'll put my hand up again if I need to feel the need to speak more to it. I'm curious and interested to hear what other people have to say. So I'll leave it at that for now, Madam Speaker.
Okay, Mr. Doherty and then Mr. Tucker.
Right. Well, the reason why is right at the top of this motion, that in anticipation of the committee receiving an order of reference pursuant to Standing Order 32.7, that no later than the 20th sitting day of the present session, the committee shall consider the document outlining the government's reasons for the latest prorogation and in preparation for the study. We talked about being efficient in this committee, and requesting the information in advance would help. I will challenge my friend, Mr. Garrettson, in the fact that that he hasn't had the time to do that or to review this motion in advance. We have just done. We've just passed 3 motions without the opportunity to really really review. Again, going back to section 32.7 of our standing orders, that not later than 20 sitting days after the beginning of the second and subsequent session of the Parliament and Ministry or Crown shall lay upon the table a document outlining the reasons for the latest prorogation. This document shall be deemed referred to the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs immediately and after it's presented in the House. And I would also mention that there is no consent to adjourn at 5:30. Nobody agreed at that on the onset. And so, yes, there are votes that will be taking place in later on this evening. But
Point of order.
Madam Speaker, Madam Chair,
Yeah,
point of order.
I move
Mr.
that
Garrettson, right after Mr. Doherty's done, I'll hear your point of order.
So
point of order takes precedence over a speaking list.
I would move. I have the floor, but I would move that that the call be put to the committee.
Point of order.
Okay, Mr. Garrettson.
Madam Clerk, just on Mr. Doherty's point, can you confirm if the room is available where the clerk is with the translators beyond 5:30 p.m.?
I'm trying to determine that right now. I don't have an answer yet for the availability of the room or the technical staff at this point, but as soon as I do have information, I'll provide it to the chair.
And I was trying to go through this motion myself, just to give you an idea of where my head's at right now. And I went over it on the side with the clerk as well. Looking at it, it's the first paragraph may seem to be in order, but to look through the rest of it, I would need some time. I would need a little bit of time to go through it all and then make a ruling on it. So I'd like to personally take it under advisement and perhaps do my best to come back at the next meeting with a ruling on this. But I'm not sure when the next meeting is scheduled for at this point, but I would do my best to come back at the next meeting, but take it under advisement at this time. Mr. Tucker.
Yes, I'll keep my comments relatively short here because I know that others will want to explore this motion a little bit more. But I would just encourage the clerk to check not just during how much longer, but into the evening if we are able to keep the room and get translation services done, because I do believe this is something that we should be discussing. We've been PROG for 6 weeks. We're online. Everyone is being safe. We can discuss this motion, and I would believe that it would pass given that debate. So those are the comments that I have right now.
Okay. Ms. Vecchio, is your hand up from before, or I think it might be up from before?
It was, and it was just in reference to, once again, I recognize that Mr. Gerritsen had asked, and I do know that it was brought forward by Mr. Doherty, and it's basically on 32.7, and the fact that due to prorogation that there has to be something outlining the reasons. And I think we're having a simple request to the government. Why did you prorogue? And we're just asking that simple. Yes, there may be a little bit of a little bit of skepticism, of course, but it's our job to investigate. We're parliamentarians, and our job in committee is to investigate. So I'm concerned that if how long we may end up delaying this, I believe it's all in order, but of course that will be up to the clerk to decide on what he may or may not see there. But I'll just pass that forward. Thank you.
Yeah. And in response to that, that is what I was saying, that it seems like the first part, which is the prorogation part that you're mentioning, looks fine, but there is so much more in this motion at this time that's why I would prefer to take it under advisement right now and come back with a decision on that and give the clerk and his team some time and me myself some time to look it through thoroughly. Ms. Blaney and then Monsieur Therrien.
Well, thank you.
Was there a point of order there?
There was a point of order. Madam Chair, and sorry to my colleagues, Ms. Blaney and Mr. Therrien, I'll be short on this. If the committee is prepared to vote on this, the majority of the committee is prepared to vote on this. The only side that we've heard so far that is against it is the Liberals, the Liberal side. But
is this a point of order or part of the debate?
No, this is not this is a point of order. We should put the call to the people, to the committee.
Okay. I think that might be debate at this point in time, since there are hands up right now to speak. So Ms. Blaney.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I just want to reflect on what Mr. Gerritsen said about the highest numbers we've seen here. That is a concern, but I also want to remind everyone here that it's also when CERB is ending, and a lot of Canadians are wondering what they're going to do and how they're going to pay their bills. And unfortunately, we did have a government that made a decision to move forward to prorogation, which really meant that day that we were set to sit in the House, where I was hoping personally to see legislation come forward about what was going to happen next, so that we could have appropriate debate, get those things moved through this House, and move forward to support Canadians, was my concern. And what I've heard from my constituents, sadly, is there is a lot of deep held concern and frustration that this method of moving forward by the government, really silencing Parliament, was based on the scandal. And I think that it is important that we uncover that and You know, I am a newer member to this committee. I do know that, you know, our job is to look at the procedural process of how decisions are made. So I do feel that this is something that we should be looking at, and we should be making sure that in a time of a pandemic, it wasn't the government's choice to make this decision based on a political decision-making process. You know, one of the things I would like to be studying in this place, in this committee as well, is, you know, what does an election look like potentially during a pandemic? How do we make a plan, a national plan to look across Canada? There's a lot of things that I would love to get on with doing. But unfortunately, we had a government that silenced all of our abilities to make those actions happen. So I'm really in a position of feeling a deep element of concern, wanting to make sure that we are all moving together to look after the needs of Canadians and not, you know, silencing the voice of those folks who put us here simply because we had a prime minister who was in a situation and we had ministers that were in a situation that perhaps they should not have been. So I guess my question to you, and I understand that Mr. Terrien wants to speak. I think it is absolutely important that all the parties speak. If we are not going to vote on this today, I do want to know that there is a commitment from the chair to find out when the next date will be, that we can be back in this committee very quickly to deal with this very important issue. Thank you.
Absolutely, Ms. Blaney. I will find that out. And there is a commitment to carry on. And I'm by no means saying that the study won't be our first study. I'm just saying that there was a lot to absorb and I just want to see. And the first part of it does seem to me to be in order and proper. There's just so much more of work that we usually do after we say, oh, that we're going to do a certain study, and then we're going to call these witnesses. I think all of that is merged into this one motion. So I just feel I need to take my time to actually read through it all before making any call on that. That's all. But of course, I would get back to you very soon on it. And we'll figure out when the next meeting, when we can have the next meeting, and hopefully that can be very, very soon. Mr. Turnbull. Mr. Terrien, is your hand down now? Okay, you're still up. Mr. Terrien.
I think I have 2 minutes left, if I'm correct. Oui, il vous reste certainement 2 minutes et peut-être plus. Well, when Parliament ended, when prorogation was asked, the Liberal government was in an explosive situation with the We Charity scandal. The Minister of Finance had resigned. We know all this. I don't have to say all this. And prorogation meant that the 4 committees that were studying We Charity stopped. So there were a lot of questions left unanswered. And many people, of course, thought that it was good for the Prime Minister for things to be stopped in this fashion. And I'm one of those. But we can give the benefit of the doubt. If there's a prorogation, maybe it's because they have good ideas, they have solutions for the problems of the pandemic. So we were impatiently waiting for the speech from the throne, but we have seen that there is nothing in the speech from the throne indicating that a prorogation was needed. And the prorogation by the Prime Minister had no meaning. So I think that we have to study this, inquire about this, and with the motion tabled by the Conservative government, we have the opportunity to inquire on what Canadians want to know. That is, was it the We Charity issue that made the government prorogate and close the Parliament in order not to give real answers? I cannot be against this in any way.
For your views, Monsieur Terrien. Mr. Turnbull, Mr. Gerritsen, Mr. Algabra, and Mr. Doherty.
Still like struggling to understand the Ms. Vecchio's motion because it was so long. She read it so quickly. Ms. Vecchio, you must have practiced reading that quickly because I couldn't comprehend it. It was like lightning fast. So I really appreciate the, I would almost appreciate the opportunity to sit down and actually read it through and really understand it. There seem to be all kinds of things in there that I'm not even sure how they're related to prorogation. From my perspective, prorogation seemed to be very clear that the mandate that our government had from the people, the context had shifted dramatically, and prorogation seemed to be an opportunity to reset. And I think that was a very clear message. So I'm not sure how this is getting linked to a whole bunch of other documents and questions that you have, but I certainly feel that that's implied in the way that this motion has been crafted. I would really like to pick that apart and ask questions about that and have the opportunity to debate that, just to make sure that we're fully clear on, before we vote on anything.
Would the committee be okay with seeing as how it's 5:32 at this time, with giving me a little bit of a time to take this motion under advisement and come back with a decision at the next meeting?
No.
No, why can't we deal with this tonight then?
Yeah.
Take a break for the votes.
It's
and this is the motion that's on the floor. This is what we
Madam
have
Chair,
to
right.
address first.
It's not your prerogative to decide how a committee deals with a motion. It's the committee's prerogative as
She
to
was
how we
asking.
deal with
She
it.
was asking for your advice.
I'm asking you whether you'd be okay with me seeing if the whole motion as is in order under our mandate of this committee. I do see how large parts of it are. So I'm leaning that way. I definitely am. I just want to be able to read the whole thing and have advice from the clerk on that as well. And you would have my commitment to get back to you at the next meeting on this.
Why can't we suspend for votes and come back after votes?
Perhaps if you consider, so just suspend rather than adjourn and then come back at another meeting date, which could be tomorrow or the next day?
This evening.
Okay.
Point of order.
Yes, Mr. Gerritsen?
Maybe the clerk can clarify this, but the chair can suspend the meeting at any time. Is that not correct?
While a motion's on the floor?
Yeah. Justin, if you could chime in on that.
The committee would suspend with the consent of the committee or the committee's suggestion that it would suspend. Now there are standing orders. There's a standing order related to when the bells are ringing to call you into a vote, where there is essentially akin to an automatic suspension for the time that it takes for you to be called to the chamber, or in this case virtually as well, to perform, for you to vote. And then once the voting is done, you come back to the meeting and the meeting resumes.
I'm just going to say, I understand. And Ryan, I do speak fast. That's just what I do. I'm happy to go slower if you want me to, and I can do clause by clause if you want to go through that so we can discuss it until the bells start to ring. But I don't know if there'll be much time. But if you want to go through it clause by clause, I'm happy to work with you.
Okay. I guess the ball is in my.
We have an hour before the bells. Why can't we try to come to some form of resolution right now? You've got a majority of the committee that is in support of this.
Justin, we have the room until what time?
Point of order. Is there a speakers list? Just checking.
Yes, there is a speakers list. Justin, what time do we have the room until? So I can plan accordingly.
I'm still checking on that. We can continue to go for the time being, but I'm trying to get a precise indication just how long that the committee can go. So I'm trying to get that information. As soon as I have something definitive, I'll let you know.
Okay, so I guess at this point we could go till 6, as seeing as how the bells are going to be going off at 6. And then I don't know whether we have the room again, so I know there were some suggestions made to come back tonight. That is why I'm saying that if you
Madam
leave this
Chair?
in my court, I could take a look at this and we could come back at the very next opportunity where we could have a room available. Yes, Mr.
Madam Chair,
Doherty.
I believe the bells are at 6:30.
Oh, the bells are at 6:30. Okay, the vote is at 7. Okay, so if we have the room until 6:30, I guess we could go until 6:30 today, if it is available, since the clerk is looking into that, or up until the point the room is available or the bells ring, whichever comes first. And we could carry on with the speakers list if I don't have consent at this point. Okay. Mr. Algabra, I believe. Mr. Turnbull, you had already spoken, right, just before? Mr. Algabra.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to welcome all the new members to the committee and thank Ms. Vecchio for her first motion. It really reveals a lot of care for Canadians. I know the first thing they're going to think when they read this motion, if they read it, is that, wow, this committee really cares
Personal
about
attacks not needed. Thank you.
our well-being, and it advances the interest of Canadians. But I mean, we are in a political world, and we are, I guess, in a political environment, and I understand that some members want to turn it political. And I liked actually her summary. I wish the motion was reduced to her summary where she said, we just want to study the cause of prorogation. And I think if that motion was worded that way, I can see how it fits within the scope of this committee. And I could see how it falls on the shoulders of this committee to study this. And I actually wouldn't have a problem with it. The way the details that are written in this committee, and I have no doubt that many other committees will also be pursuing the line and in looking into we and the decisions behind we, and I'm sure there will be other committees that are doing this. I just really don't understand how we're asked to vote on a motion that is clearly way outside the scope of this committee, especially when I know that there are other committees will be doing this study. And I feel that this motion has gone way beyond what is expected of us as committee members and what is expected of us as members of the PROC. So, I would like to encourage Ms. Vecchio maybe perhaps to reword it to the way she explained it, where she wants to study the prorogation. I think that's fine. That sounds reasonable. That sounds within the mandate of PROC, and perhaps remove all the other paragraphs after that, because it really creates a clear, unfortunately, outline for something that is outside the scope of this committee. And I ask my colleagues as well to be responsible and thoughtful about what it is that this committee is going to be studying, and what is the work that is before us. And the question of prorogation, I think, is legitimate, and I think it's fair for our opposition to ask about that. But all these other aspects that are mentioned within this motion, I just fail to understand how they fall within the scope of this committee.
Next, we have Mr. Doherty.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I'll ask that, that you would forward my colleague, Ms. Vecchio, and maybe any other colleagues the same, that you would afford your same Liberal colleagues. Mr. Algabra came at one of our colleagues, Ms. Vecchio, with a backhanded slap, so to speak. That's what we call it in our neck of the woods here. This is listen, this is relevant to our committee. Standing Order 32.7 says that we are going to get the report table within 20 days of the House being back. This will allow us to be as prepared as possible. There's no hidden monsters in here. We have been absolutely forthright and clear in what our requests are. It is exactly what my colleague Ms. Blaney has mentioned, as well as Mr. Tarian has mentioned, and Canadians want to know, right? Why in the heart and the depth of a global pandemic, this government, when they needed them the most, a week away from the emergency relief benefits coming to a halt, why they abandoned them, why this government abandoned Canadians. And they deserve to know that. And we're going to get the report here at the PROC. It's going to be tabled for the PROC committee, but it behooves us to be prepared for that and to do our own due diligence. And so the motion that is before you today, and it's no wonder why the Liberals are squirming on this committee and as to why they're dithering and delaying. And want to have an opportunity to review. But again, I'll bring you back to the motions that we all came together and supported earlier today that we never had a chance to really review in advance. I think if we have the opportunity to maybe, to Mr. Turnbull's comment, have my colleague Specchio reread, maybe at a slower pace, and maybe that will help Mr. Turnbull comprehend it a little bit better. But there's nothing in here. It's very forthright. There's nothing that is should come as a surprise. And Canadians want to know: was the prorogation for 6 weeks an honest operational kind of recharge or reset, or was it really just to run away from the WE scandal? I can see my colleagues nodding their head in affirmative and shaking their heads in the negative, but it behooves all of us here on this committee to be able to try and do that work. And I've always said that whatever committee that we're on, whether it was fisheries or transport, at one point we have to come together as a group and be able to do this work. And sometimes it exposes wounds and scars from within on whichever side. But we have to be able to have the fortitude to be able to do that. And so, again, you've got the opposition, obviously, and in 100% agreement as we move forward. And then you've got the government, of course, trying to protect their backsides. And Madam Chair, I just ask for some leadership from you. And we've got over an hour here. I think we should be able to get to a vote on this. And that would send a real message to Canadians that yet another Liberal-run committee is not blocking any study in terms of prorogation or the WE scandal. And that's really what people want to see. If this was really a recharge, a reset, then let's see if it was, and we're able to actually move forward and do some work. There should be nothing in here that the Liberals should be afraid of, or the government should be afraid of, if they're telling the truth. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Good points, Mr. Doherty. Mr. Garrettson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't even know where to begin with that. Listen, at the end of the day, what this comes down to for me, the most offensive part of all of this for me is the fact that this is being sprung on us, literally, on the fly. Like, based on the comments from Mr. Doherty, he was saying that he keeps saying all the opposition is in favor of it. So clearly, all the opposition shared this or have had the opportunity to look at this prior to this meeting.
Not true. Just from the comments.
Excuse me, I think I have the floor. I mean, obviously, based on what he said, they've conspired in advance to do this. And if I'm to take Mr. Doherty at his word when he says that we are, when he says that everything's done in good faith and so on and so forth, well, if it was really done in good faith, why wouldn't you have given it to us in advance of the meeting as well, as you clearly did based on your comments? So, I mean, I don't think that we're asking for too much. For Mr. Doherty to somehow compare this to the 3 motions that we did in routine proceedings is absolutely ludicrous. We're talking about whether or not we're going to change the amount of time somebody gets to speak versus an entire motion that has all these different parts to it that we're somehow supposed to be able to absorb and understand just based on one reading. And I mean, at the end of the day, this is what it's going to come down to, is that whether or not the Conservatives genuinely want to work on this committee with the government, or whether this is just an opportunity to try to dig up some dirt. I know they're looking for this silver bullet that they seem to think exists deep within all these documents that they're trying to pull. And I a number of Conservatives have been on a government side before. No member of this committee certainly knows if that silver bullet they're looking for exists. But what we do know is that the best way to get information is to be as collaborative as possible with all members on the committee. So, I mean, my sense is that the best thing to do moving forward would be for us to allow this discussion to happen offline. As I want to discuss this motion with my caucus, I think that they would want, just like the Conservatives had the opportunity to discuss it with themselves and possibly the NDP and the bloc based on Mr. Doherty's comments. I mean, maybe they had the opportunity. I would like to discuss this with my with my colleagues. For me, this is not about not being able to vote on this. One way or the other, we can vote on this. My only problem is voting on it right now, because I just feel that I and other Liberal colleagues have been completely slighted by the manner in which this was sprung on us. You're asking me to vote on something that I don't fully understand. You talk about what's in the best interest of Canadians. Well, I'm certainly not representing Canadians that well when I am being asked to vote on something that I haven't had the opportunity to really even understand or to, thoroughly discuss with my colleagues before we do that. Notwithstanding the fact that, we're now learning from what the chair was saying, that she doesn't even know if this is in order, that this motion's in order. So, but nevertheless, there's still a desire to immediately vote on this. And I just don't think that it's something that we need to do right now. We can do it at the next meeting that comes up whenever we have our next meeting, we can pick it up from there. But at least if you're going to make me, take a position on this, at least you will have given me the opportunity to thoroughly read it and understand it, and to have my my colleagues have a discussion with them on it. So, Madam Chair, I would really like to take Ms. Vecchio up on her offer. Could she read this motion to us again very slowly this time so that we can really absorb every word of it to the best of our ability?
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Lewinsky.
And not that I'm opposed to Ms. Vecchio reading it again, but I believe you do have a speakers list. I believe
Yes.
I'm on the speakers list, so
And I was.
I would rather speak before Ms. Vecchio.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Lukiski, we are going to carry on with the speakers list, and then at the end of the speakers list, we could have that motion read out before any, I guess, especially before any vote, if one does occur today. I also wanted to just in the middle right now. Just let you know about some logistical housekeeping, the questions that were put forth by some of the members earlier about how long we can go. So just like I had mentioned, we do have until 6:30 at this point, until the bells ring. The room is available, and the clerk has arranged for staff to rotate and new staff to support staff to come in. So if you would like to pick up after the vote, we could also do so. And that is up to the committee until either until the time such time as you would like to vote on this motion, or you would like to call a vote on adjournment for the day. So someone can move to adjourn for the day as well, and we could pick up. And just like I said, I need time. I can't rule whether it's in order. It does seem, like I said initially, especially the first part, to be in order, but I do need time to read it in order to know that for myself, and I would need until next meeting at least. But like I said, I just want to reiterate, you do have my commitment that we would start off with this piece of business right off the top, if we do at some point adjourn. Okay, so now
So
we will
I still
carry
have
on.
the floor. Oh, I still have
We
the
will
floor.
carry
Point
on with the speakers list. Yes. Oh, you
yeah, but I
raised a
still
point
I
of
still
order?
have the floor, right? Because a point of order was raised while I was speaking, and I still have the floor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Right.
Carry on, Mr. Garrettson, and then
you.
Mr. Turnbull, Mr. Algabra, Mr. Oh no, somebody hasn't put their hands down. My list, I think, is a little out of order. Who is next on the speakers list after Mr. Garrettson? If you could please, just a reminder too, I wasn't at the top because we really got right into it today. I did want to make sure we got into the routine motions and had those passed today. But
and Madam Chair, I don't want to interrupt Mark. I'm not trying to throw you off, but I'm just curious, where am I on the speakers list?
yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out before we move on. I don't see.
He had a Matt.
I had my
Chair?
I had my hand raised some time ago. I just don't know, Madam Chair, whether or not you actually got me on the list.
Yeah, mine was taken down at some point too, and then I had to re-raise it. I don't know how that happened.
And you raised Mr. Lukiski, you raised your hand in the participants bar, like the actual icon?
Yes, I believe it's still raised. I never took it down.
Madam Chair, my accounting of the speaking list would suggest, in fact, it's Mr. Lukiski after Mr. Garrettson. Yeah.
Okay. His name is not showing up on my list, so I'm going to try to figure out what happened with that and how I can make sure that doesn't occur where someone's hand is removed. Okay, Mr. Garrettson.
Yeah, thank you.
Carry on.
Thank you. So, I mean, I just want to get back, because I heard what Ms. Blaney said, back to her comments about how, the fact that there are a lot of Canadians out there that are worried and are looking for help, and they absolutely are. And I don't understand how this particular motion that is before us is going to be helping Canadians with the needs that they have right now. There's certainly the, if there's a big, secret out there, and, the Conservatives and all opposition parties are trying to get to the bottom of it. I respect that. I respect that role as the opposition. But I just, and I would encourage you to do that to the best of your ability, in a way that's fair, by, making sure that members from all parties have an opportunity to participate in, especially motions that are brought forward before a committee. And that's not what is happening here, because we just didn't have that opportunity. But most importantly, when we get back to Canadians and the help that they're looking for right now, well, then what we should really be doing, if that's what we care about the most, is getting back into the House and debating the Bill C4, which was just tabled, rather than other stall tactics that the Conservatives are pulling in the House right now. It can't, make you wonder, what objective do people really have? What is the most important thing for people? And the reality is that what we're seeing right now is that the Conservatives don't care about anything but we. And I get it. You're going after what you see as the some scandal that's going to, you know, make things, incredibly bad for the government. I get it, but listen, everyday Canadians, what they care about right now is they care about being taken care of. They care about knowing that their government is here for them. They care about Parliament actually working for them. Like, like I don't understand why the Conservatives are so hell-bent on this. They seem to be like this is the only thing that ever matters to them. When the reality situation is for once, why can't the Conservatives just drop the whole charade of hating on the Prime Minister and making everything a personal attack and just start to discuss policy? Why don't they come forward and say, hey, we don't like this. Why don't we do this instead? Or really advocate for a policy. But you saw it, Madam Chair, in the last session of Parliament. Every time that the Conservatives got an opportunity for an opposition motion, it was just all about how the Prime Minister is such a horrible human being, and we need to, look into this and this and that, instead of actually doing something for Canadians, like actually bringing forward some kind of piece of policy that would actually better their lives. And what we're seeing right now is just more typical Conservative stuff, where they just bringing forward these motions because they think and they hope to God that they can win an election by making somebody else look bad rather than actually having their own ideas. And for me, it's so incredibly frustrating, because when it comes right back to it, we talk about the people who are affected by this pandemic. And I can't remember who it was, Mr. Doherty or Ms. Vecchio a little while ago said that, the Canadians want to know what we're doing for them. Yeah, they certainly do. But I got news for you. If top of mind is not we, do they want to know the truth and make sure that nothing nefarious happened? Absolutely. And they have a right to know that, okay? And you have a right to bring that forward on their behalf. But that's not what's most important to them right now. What's most important to them right now is knowing that they're going to be taken care of throughout this pandemic, and knowing that their government and that Parliament is there for them, and knowing that their opposition parties are there to make sure that whatever legislation is brought forward by the government is the best that it can possibly be. And so, I'll hand it to the NDP. Um, you know, the NDP, at least they did that. At least they were looking for ways to make Canadians' lives better throughout this whole pandemic. And the fact that they've now decided they're going to vote in favor of the speech from the throne, at least they're coming to the table with a desire to make lives better, rather than just a desire to kill one particular political career. So I'll leave it at that for now, Madam Speaker. I'm interested to hear what others have to say about this, but I'm extremely disappointed that I, as a parliamentarian, as a member of Parliament, was not afforded an opportunity to have a good, solid look at this particular motion and to understand it and to digest it and to make sure that I knew what I was voting on and to discuss it with my colleagues. Instead, I'm just trying, it's an intentional attempt to blindside me. And that is what I find to be the absolute most offensive part of what has been put forward to us by the Conservatives. And at the end of the day, like I said, if the Conservatives want to see a vote on this, they will get their day to see a vote on it. But I cannot see that being right now or today or after our votes, because I don't think that we've been treated fairly in this process of how this has been brought forward. And I am demanding the opportunity as a parliamentarian and to do my due diligence to properly look at this motion and then to decide how I want to vote on it after I have an opportunity to caucus with my colleagues on it. So I'll leave it at that for now, Madam Chair, and then I'll raise my hand again if I feel the need to discuss this further.
Okay, Mr. Lukaski.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think I'm not 100% sure of this, but I believe I may be one of the only members of this committee that was still in Parliament during the time of the Conservative government under Stephen Harper's prorogation. And I can assure all committee members, in response to what Mark was saying, that there was a lot of study on the reasons why the Conservative government at the time prorogued. This committee, PROC, called many witnesses forward to talk about prorogation, the need for prorogation, the reasons behind prorogation. So I would just point that out, that for those who suggest that this is really a worthless exercise, it is not. It is not. I would also point out that, quite frankly, in effect, even though Karen's motion went on and had several subsets to it, if you really drill down to the heart, to the essence of it, it is really just a request for witnesses and documents to be produced to study the reasons behind the government proroguing Parliament. That's all that's saying. And Mark, I can appreciate when you and others may be saying that you want some time to study this. Mark, you would know, and Omar would know as well as I do. In the last 45 minutes since we've been debating this, members of the PMO and probably the House Leader staff and the whip staff have been poring over this motion closely. They've been studying it. They have an opinion. They will be giving you advice as to which motion you could support, perhaps. Sorry, Mark, you're on mute, but thanks for trying.
I didn't want to interrupt you. I just want to say it's my vote, not theirs.
Understood, Mark. But I mean, your staff is examining this as we speak. And procedurally, of course, Karen had every right in the world to introduce a motion during committee business. So it wasn't sprung on anyone. This is something procedurally that's quite correct. If you're talking about springing something on people, I mean, I guess I could make the political argument that, how about prorogation itself? That was sprung on us. We didn't know the Prime Minister was going to prorogue and shut down Parliament and shut down committees. So
neither did I.
It kind of cuts both ways. However, I think the key element here, Mark, that you may not be either grasping or admitting, is that both committees and the House can work at the same time independently. Your argument is that why in the world would the Conservatives spring this on us when we're discussing things like Bill C2 and C4 and getting aid to Canadians, which quite frankly I support. I think that even though we believe that the government is going to have to account for its spending measures, I don't think anyone's denying the fact that Canadians, millions of Canadians, need support financially right now. The House is dealing with that right now. We're having a vote in about half an hour on those two motions right now. So the House can do its work. We're not circumventing any of the work of the House and parliamentarians. All we're doing is saying, now that committees have been restruck, let's start meeting to discuss things like prorogation and some of the other elements of other committees that had met. How about the China-Canada Special Committee? That was struck down. Do you not believe that that's an important committee? I certainly do. I would like to see that back up and running, and I think most Canadians would as well. So that's my only point, Mark. I mean, you keep saying that it's offensive because we sprung this on you without notice. Well, perhaps it was without notice, but it certainly was unwarranted. There's plenty of history and precedents about studies about prorogation. Governments in the past have prorogued on many occasions, and committees have studied the reasons for that. That's all that Karen's motion is speaking to. Let's call witnesses and produce documents to ask the government the very simple question, why? Why did you prorogue? What did you believe were the underlying and motivating factors to prorogue that shut down Parliament for 5 weeks? That's as simple as it gets. So you may want to study the wording of Karen's motion, but that in essence is what it's saying. Give us the ability to call witnesses and produce documents, and let's study it. That's it. In a nutshell, that's it. So I don't know how much time you actually need, but for example, I know we're going to be probably voting for an hour. This is online voting, and the last couple of nights when we've had practice sessions, it usually takes about an hour to run through the roll. You'll have ample opportunity to go over line by line, clause by clause, the motion that Karen brought forward. So I don't think there's really any excuse to say we need to delay. I believe probably by the time we get back after the 6:30 vote has been concluded, I would hope by that time you will have had the opportunity to read through the motion and perhaps speak to whether or not you want to vote on the motion at that time. That's all I have to say, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. All last two speakers have both brought up very good points. And does everyone see the same list, speakers list that I am currently seeing? I'm seeing Mr. Turnbull, Mr. Algabra, Mr. Doherty, Ms. Vecchio. Is that what you're seeing on your screen? Because I have a feeling, I just wanted to make sure I'm not having some issues because few hands were removed prior to that. Is that?
Ruby, I'm on the list. Ms. Blaney, I'm on the list. I'm not sure where.
Yeah. And Ruby, I see that. I see the same list that you're referring to, but I don't know how it's set up in precedence because of how we turn there, because I know that I had put my hand up after Omar had spoke, and somehow he's on the list prior to me. So that's kind of questions that I'm asking. So that's all.
And I've had my name on there for a while.
Madam Chair, the list, I've been keeping a list, and I have Mr. Turnbull, Mr. Doherty, Ms. Vecchio, and Mr. Algabra.
I put my hand up again too.
And Miss Blaney was on there as well.
That's right, Ms. Blaney, and then Mr. Garrettson.
Madam Chair, you're on mute.
The only person that's not on your list, Justin, is Mr. Algabra. Otherwise, you have Mr. Turnbull, Mr. Doherty, Ms. Vecchio, Ms. Blaney, Mr. Garrettson, correct?
And just prior to Ms. Blaney, I do have Mr. Algabra.
Okay. So that's the only one thing, I guess that's weird. The list goes according to the time you put your hand up. Every now and then where we have issues is where someone has forgotten to take their hand down. That could mess up the order here and there. So I'll try to look at that a little bit more carefully to make sure that after a person speaks their hand, we have them put their hand back down. So next, we've got Mr. Turnbull, but I won't be entertaining any hand waving moving forward just because we have so many speakers. It's difficult to do that when there's so many that are interested in speaking. So this way, it'll be a little bit more systematic. So just raise your hand in the toolbar. Mr. Turnbull.
Thank you, Madam Chair. More than fair, as always. So forgive me, folks. I'm a relatively new member, and so I'm sort of struck by this this motion and sort of just struggling to try and interpret this. Like the role of the Procedure and House Affairs Committee, in my mind, is to study rules and practices of the House, its committees, questions of privilege, etc. How is this related? You know, I guess that's like, I understand you're referencing the Standing Order 32.7 at the beginning of your motion, which I think is what was referenced numerous times by Mr. Doherty and Ms. Vecchio, which I believe already implies that the tabling of documents for prorogation explaining reasons has to be done in the House and then referred to the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. So why do we need a motion at all when that's already a rule in the standing orders? So that process is going to happen. Whereas this, based on Ms. Vecchio's reading, which was very fast, and I confess I didn't fully comprehend all of it, but and I would like her to reread it if possible, but I just find it really assumes the reason. So if the intention was what Mr. Lewinsky, sorry,
You're getting closer. You're getting closer.
Lewinsky, you know, if the intention is pure in that, you know, you just want to understand the reasons for prorogation, then why assume the reasons in terms of specific documentation? I caught one aspect of this that was related to the commercial rent assistance. Like, what does that have to do with prorogation? I have absolutely, it makes no, it certainly implies some kind of connection might be there in terms of the motion, but it seems like a bit of a fishing expedition for reasons that I don't particularly understand. So I would really need to debate each point and each clause and go through it very carefully, because right now, based on my limited understanding, and I confess I'm basically saying I don't completely understand why this is necessary, when certainly it's already a standing order to table documents to explain prorogation. So what's the need? Like, why is there a motion needed when we know within 20 days that's going to happen already, and PROC's going to have the chance to review that as a committee? So, Mr. Lukowski, that's sort of to you, and then to Ms. Vecchio. Those are questions I'd love to hear your perspective on.
Okay, Mr. Doherty.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I want to just touch on the comments that our colleague, Mr. Gerritsen, mentioned about fairness. I hope he was as energetic and we saw the same fevered pitch when the government chose to prorogue for 5 or 6 weeks. Where was the fairness to the Canadians that were in the heart of this pandemic that were struggling? Where's the fairness to the small business owners in my riding that are still struggling to try and be recognized for any type of emergency benefit, or the single parent or the person that's out of work? Where's the fairness there? Where's the fairness in allowing the 338 members of Parliament to be able to work together collaboratively as Team Canada, or to represent their ridings and their electors when the government chose to suspend for 6 weeks? Where was the fairness there? And where was Mr. Gerritsen's arguments at that point? Every day, and I'm not discounting what you all have gone through in terms of this past 6 months or 7 months of this pandemic, but I can tell you how it has been in my riding that has been deeply hit by this pandemic in terms of job losses, and people just losing everything. Canadians do want to know why it was done. Where was the fairness there? Where was the fairness? Why did we have to prorogue for 6 weeks to get a throne speech like we got, right when things seemed to be kind of going sideways for the government? Who chose to do that? Who chose to hit reset? Again, Mr. Gerritsen seemed like in a small little cubicle that he's in the phone booth there, that he was having a hard time containing himself. Mr. Galbraith chose to take a shot at our colleague, Ms. Vecchio. If we want to bring fairness in, he talked about, every time that the opposition gets up, they want to talk about, point fingers and slander our prime minister. We're not the ones that actually made him do any of the ethical lapses that he's done, or his ministers. It's him and himself or his ministers that are doing it on their own. We didn't put him in that position. They put themselves in that position, and Canadians want to know why, in the heart of and right in the middle of a global pandemic, our government chose to actually remove the voices that they elected, or the people that they elected to be their voices. We have an opportunity right now to try and bring this forward. As my colleague, Mr. Lukowski, said so eloquently, all we're asking for is a study. As Section 32.7 said, Mr. Turnbull mentioned it, that we've quoted it a number of times. The report's coming. We want to study it, but we want to be prepared. And we want to bring people to the table that were around the table that made these decisions. We want to see the unredacted reasons or reports as to why they're doing it. Listen, Liberal-run committees have shut this down at every step of the way. So your guys' comments today and your reaction to this today is no different than what we've come to expect. Was there collusion from the opposition side? No, there wasn't. That just shows that they're all doing the same thing, though, that they're all hearing from their constituents. They all have the same concerns that we're hearing, is that Canadians want to know why this was done. There was no fairness when that vote on prorogation came down. It was heavy-handed, and it's done, just as we've seen for time and again under this government's mandate. It's heavy-handed, and they like to stand up and talk about fairness and what have you, but really it's the grassroots and the people within our communities that are suffering. Where's the fairness in the fact that my softwood lumber guys, my forest producers, still don't have a softwood lumber agreement? Ms. Blaney and our regions have been hard hit by the downturn in the forest industry because of the uncertainty faced by this government and brought forward by this government's policy. Whether it's oil and gas, natural resources, we're hit hard. Where's the fairness there? So, Mr. Gerritsen, when you talk about fairness, I have a real hard time sitting here and listening to you get up on your soapbox and talk about the fairness and talk about every time that the Conservatives want to stand up or the opposition want to stand up and point fingers at the Prime Minister and his policies. Well, that's our job. Our job is to also work collaboratively across the way. And I think that this motion that is put forth doesn't expose anything other than what it's asking for is let's get the documents, let's get the people before us that were at the heart of the decision to prorogue Parliament for 6 weeks and why they did it. I would challenge our committee members to really look around and look within. That's our job here, is to do better for Canadians. I think Ms. Vecchio, while she read it fast, I had an opportunity to read it as she was reading it. I understand it. I didn't get a chance to see it beforehand. No different than the motions that we had regarding the standing orders or how we were going to move forward in terms of committee witnesses and the round of questionings. So, Mr. Gerritsen, you can talk fairness all you want, but respect and fairness is given, and it should be earned, and it's a two-way street. So whichever way whatever you're doing, if you're tweeting about it right now, or you're sitting in there and you're sending messages to PMO about what you should do, I think we should actually move forward on this and vote, and let's get studying it and send a message to Canadians that another Liberal-led committee isn't going to block this opportunity for Canadians to really find out what happened. And I'll cede the floor.
Ms. Vecchio and then Mr. Alghabra.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm just going to start with some simple things. I just specifically to Mr. Alghabra and Mr. Gerritsen, when you talk about Conservatives only want to talk about we. Well, prior to the prorogation, I was the chair of Status of Women, where we worked our butts off to have an excellent study that we did where we talked about violence against women, we talked about shelters, we talked about the she economy, we talked about all of these different things. One day before that letter was finalized, prorogation took place. So to all of those members who came here to work really hard to make sure that we could be the voices of women across Canada, do not think that this is about we, because I, and don't question my integrity, will always fight for Canadians. You may think that this is all about we, but I'm going to remind you that on the Standing Committee of Agriculture, they were talking about support for poultry and egg farmers. That's not we. On the Canada-China relations, well, we know we've got a problem there, and I know an emergency debate was asked because there are groups that are studying the genocide that is occurring in China. We talked about the Canadian trading relations. That was one of the studies that was going on. In Human Committee, I sat on off and on, and I know Ryan was working very, very hard on things that we were studying in HUMA. And we talked about housing. We talked about poverty. We talked about food banks. We talked about all of this great work that all came to an end when prorogation occurred. The systematic racism in policing services in Canada was a study that we started in public safety. But unfortunately, what happened was the prorogation took all of these studies and they just squashed them. So all of the work that were done in committees, you can talk about we and say that's all we talk about, but I challenge you, because I can tell you that at the end of the day, do I care about we? No. But do I care about an ethical government that I can sit there and be supportive and support on great legislation? If you bring it forward, absolutely. On to the fairness, if Mark ever wants to go there, well, I introduced to you Bill C4 this morning and C2. Well, we'll be voting on that at 3 a.m. on Wednesday morning. Two legislative pieces as we're coming back to this House of Commons, and we're talking 48 hours, and you're concerned about getting a piece of paper on that. Sorry, that one won't go there. But I think we have to understand that prorogation stopped all of the incredible work that was being done. There was a lot of nonpartisan work that was being done so that Canadians could put food on their table, so that poultry farmers could make sure that they're getting the money after these NAFTA negotiations and CETA and all of those great things. But you guys can turn a blind eye and not look at the big picture and say that Conservatives are only focused on we. Well, Conservatives and the NDP and the Bloc and the Liberals were all sitting on these committees for doing good work. The leadership of the PMO decided to close down Parliament. We are asking for documents to support why the prorogation occurred. And I don't think that is something uncalled for, especially when we know that the standing order has that there. I'm going to finish off this with a simple quote, and I'm sure we all know who said this because you all are standing behind him when you're supporting the Liberal government. Mr. Speaker, I hope that future Prime Ministers will answer questions from all members, not just from party leaders. I hope that future Prime Ministers will not make excessive use of omnibus bills and will not resort to prorogation to avoid problematic situations. As Todd had talked about, and as everybody has said, we came back to a throne speech, and I think Rachel talked about this. We came back to a throne speech that we thought was going to knock us on our butts because we thought the government was going to actually do something. All you did was close the door and reopen it, and nothing changed in 6 weeks. All of these programs that you're talking about are occurring on my householder that I produced 4 weeks ago. This is 4 weeks old. So don't say to me that we're coming to something new. All of these programs are old. The shelter stuff is things that we're talking about. There is not anything new. Prorogation happened, and we want to know why. And Canadians have the right to know why. It has, for me, I don't care about we. What I care is that there's beds and shelters and all of those things for our good Canadians. But as a government, and as a House of Commons, we can do it all. We can pass Bill C2 and 4 in the next 48 hours. We can have somebody studying agriculture. We can have somebody studying what's happening over in China. We can do it because there's 338 members of Parliament that are here to do our job. So I really hope that as we're going forward, you just step back and say, why did prorogation happen? Well, if it wasn't for we, prove us wrong. Simple. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Alghabra.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And let me take a moment to say that I regret that Mr. Doherty is taking my comment as a personal attack.
Apology accepted. I took it as well, but Omar, I realized.
I'm not apologizing. I'm sorry. I'm not apologizing.
Oh, okay. So, I'm sorry. I assumed you would because I thought it was really rude, but oh well.
I'm not apologizing.
Point of order. Who has the floor, Madam Chair?
Mr. Alghabra.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm really not apologizing because let me just say that I take it very seriously not to personally attack any of my colleagues. It is incredibly important that we can debate vigorously and have an argument, a healthy argument about things that we care about things that we believe Canadians care about, and we can disagree and we can point that out, but not to record that or treat that as personal attack. There is obviously a line between criticism and disagreeing and personal attacks, and we all know what that line is. But I mean, Mr. Doherty just spent his entire intervention about saying how Liberals don't care about small business, don't care. I don't take that as personal attack. I take that as matter of political disagreement and political debate. And yes, I disagree with him, but I don't take that as a personal attack. And my observation about this motion is not personal attack against Ms. Vecchio, and it's really important to avoid, labeling disagreements in this committee in that way, because it's certainly not going to end up creating a positive and a welcoming environment for vigorous debate, yet remaining respectful. And so I want to make it very clear, and I want to encourage my colleagues maintain respect, but allow for vigorous debate. And I have a great amount of respect for all my colleagues here on this committee, and I especially want to acknowledge Mr. Lukuski. I've served with him in my previous life when I was a member of the opposition, and he's always shown me and all of our colleagues a lot of respect and class. And I know all others. I'm not saying that the others on this committee don't do the same, but I'm naming him because of his intervention. And I actually wish he would agree with me on the fact that sure, this committee can study prorogation. That is not the the point of debate here. That is not the disagreement here. It's can somebody explain to me how, let's say, for example, I'm just going to pick this point G, that an order of the committee do issue to require the government to prepare and make a return to the clerk of the committee within 10 days of the adoption of this motion, indicating what criteria were used by public servants to determine that only we could deliver the Canada Students Service Grant. Which individuals were responsible for designing the parameters of the Canada Student Service Grant? Who was present at any meeting where the parameters of the Canada Student Service Grant were discussed? Or whether Canada Student Service Grant was approved through the ordinary Treasury Board submission process, and if not, what the variations were? How is that, how is that relevant whatsoever to prorogation and the decisions behind prorogation? And if we agree to study prorogation and the reasons behind prorogation, and if we find reasons that take us down one path or another, I'm sure the committee will choose to call on certain witnesses that are based on the evidence that is presented before the committee. But this motion doesn't wait for evidence, doesn't wait for testimony, doesn't wait for a report from government. It already says, call this and do that and call Rob Silver. And like, how it's just, I wish that the presenter of this motion had reduced it to a simple language saying, let's encourage our committee to do a study on the reasons behind prorogation and invite witnesses that are relevant to that decision. I think that would have been, even to the members of the Liberal Party who perhaps some of us may be not comfortable in studying this, would have a hard time opposing it because it is within the mandate of this committee, and I can see the role of the opposition wanting to call on to study why prorogation was done and whether this speech from the throne does offer anything different or whether it doesn't offer anything different. It's all a matter of debate, and I'm happy to invite other experts and witnesses to tell us all of that. But I can go through, and I'm sure you don't want me to list one clause by clause, but I can go through clause by clause, and it's absolutely, it's very difficult for any reasonable observer to understand how is this relevant. And if we do a study and we discover that it was relevant because one witness or another said or said something else or whatever, then we can study that further. But most of what you are asking, Ms. Vecchio, in this motion is going to be studied by other committees that is mandated to do the study. And I think, that's fair. Let them study their own studies or decide on their own studies as they wish. But this is explicitly, in my opinion, and I'm looking forward to hearing not only the chair's opinion, but also the clerk's opinion. This motion has most of its elements are explicitly outside the scope of this committee. And again, perhaps members of the Conservative Party would like to reconsider in rewording their motion. But I think the way it is right now, the complex and the multi-dimension nature of this motion requires not only time to study, but I feel an opinion, a reasonable, a thoughtful opinion on whether this is within the scope of our committee or outside the scope of our committee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Blaney.
Well, thank you, everyone. And I think the bells will start to ring fairly soon. And as one of the party whips, I will need to go and organize that. So I just want to start off by saying that. You know, for me, there's a couple of things. The first thing is, you know, I think about all the students across Canada that didn't get the support that they well deserve. That's a big frustration for me and something I think needs to be explained. But I also agree. I would love to have Mrs. Vecchio read it out a little slower so that we can go through it. Um, because I think one of the key things that I heard in there was some significant commitments to timelines. And I would think that somehow the timelines coincide with the obligation for our committee to follow through with the study. So I'm interested in that as well, how those timelines go together. And I hope that we get to a vote very soon. And that is all I have to add. Okay, Mr. Garrettson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'll close this door here so you don't get background noise. You know, just in response to the comment about fairness, when I was talking about fairness, I wasn't talking about the government or, you know, the Prime Minister not treating Mr. Doherty fairly and vice versa. I was talking about the fairness to
Bells
me.
are going. Bells are going. I just need to bring that forward.
Sure. Yeah. Madam Chair, I think you need to deal with that then.
Okay. I want this to get somewhere. I want us to have a result, and actually, I want us to do a study and to get into a study as soon as possible. Like I've said, this is a very complex motion just because of all of the various parts. It starts off very simple, but then gets very complex. And I would like some time to just look at it until the next meeting. I need to look at Standing Order 108 and just see whether all parts are within the mandate, and then I feel we should get to a vote on it. But I think the most productive and most efficient thing to do at this time is to allow us to get to that point, have that brief opportunity to review it so that we're not going nowhere. So I think the best thing to do right now, and what I'm going to do, is adjourn today's meeting, and we'll meet very quickly, right back up and pick up from where we left off. That will give me enough time to review everything and make a ruling on the motion, and then we can vote. Okay.
Madam Chair, clarification, please.
We're adjourning. We are adjourned.
Yeah, just asking if you were adjourning, Madam Chair, if you have any sense when you may reconvene.
Yes, I am going to try to put a notice out for the first available opportunity that we can have a meeting this week.
Is there a vote to adjourn?
I've adjourned.
Okay, the bells have gone, so technically we can't even continue this meeting. Bye, everybody.
Chair has the right to adjourn when she wishes.